Yeah, of course, yeah. I can show you the slides I've got.
Okay.
So,
So I could then follow myself.
yeah, I think so. And the other question was, how do you restrict the AI from looking at documents you give it, not the wider
and be able actually not to cheat, but use that context.
Yeah. I think I use a thing called free GPT, and there's obviously a configuration where you can, if you add files, you can ingest files into what I'm using, it does restrict it, so it works with that. Now, that's kind of under the bonnet. I don't know. There's a configuration parameter that says that. Now, with something like ChatGPT, I think you just tell it explicitly, do not reference anything outside.
I was trying to.
And it still doesn't work.
Learn.
The thing is, what you want its knowledge of language, but you don't want its knowledge. Yeah, that's the thing. And I suspect it's all kind of, it's all self-intermeshed.
Yeah.
Probably has a better answer.
Okay.
Put something on there. We'll try and get through the questions because I think there's going to be lots of questions. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll stick to it there, but I think Slido's better.
How are you using this Java? Just say that we are using the pure one, so you just took the GitHub and you actually from the repository of the ChatGPT, you use.
Oh, I'm using a thing called Private GPT.
Private GPT.
But you can upload something to ChatGPT and other models, the limits, obviously, on how big it is unless you pay. As far as I know, I've never had that problem that you're having. So I thought if you're referencing one document to one document alone, how do you restrict it?
Yeah, that was fine.
We're going to kick off on that
later. Maybe on the copy.
I don't have a full answer to that. There might have a better answer, or we might say the same thing, so you can't. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I never have a better. You never can say never. That's the thing.
How do you restrict the prompt to use your document and your document alone?
So that is the prompt that we have here, which is the
But it's a prompt.
It is a prompt, yeah.
Okay, I'd do something further with a prompt, I guess.
Excellent. Okay, let's get ready to rumble. You need a timer to count down to 3 o'clock at this point in time, don't we?
It's 3 hours, don't it?
3 hours. So then a great question that came up there about how do you restrict the context of what you're doing. So what the goal of this afternoon is going to be is for us to start hitting some prompts at the system and try and see some of the responses. And while during the break, I've just been loading on some of the tools that we talked about this morning so that we can actually practically start doing this, right? But there was a great question that just came in around, well, how do we make sure that we're not using the large language model, we're just using my documentation? This is the kind of controversial thing, If you've heard me talk about this stuff in the past, I typically go, don't use ChatGPT. My 3 reasons for not using ChatGPT is A, obviously it's trained on 70% of the legal content, which is probably not that great anyway. The second is that you should never share confidential information outside of your landscapes. If you're testing, you should not be passing proprietary information up to ChatGPT. Not because they're going to index it like Samsung kind of was worried. It's more about that it's not, the European Union AI Act will give you you'll get into a lot of trouble. A bit like GDPR, right? You shouldn't be sharing your customer data with a third party over email, right? It's as simple as that. However, like we said, large language models are incredibly useful as a dictionary term for everything that exists in the world. But when we want to be able to focus and we want to avoid hallucinations, which was your kind of question as well, was you want it to be as super focused as it possibly can. You want to be able to say to it, just look at the documentation that I provided, and I don't want to go to the internet. I don't want Google indexed archive.org. I just want you to look at the requirement spec that I've just passed you And as it said, I've saved the document as requirement spec and will refer to it in the future. So I have to now call it requirement spec. If I've got 3 documents I've uploaded, I've called it requirement spec, requirement document, and requirement SRS, I need to refer to the terminology that it's provided to tag it, unless you've specifically told it, I'm uploading this document and I'm going to call it Paul. Whenever I say Paul, ask about Paul, I want you just to read that document. I don't want you to go to the internet. And that's why suddenly these responses that come back have been super focused just to that document.
And I don't know if that answers the problem, because does that always work?
Yeah.
Or is,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's your
100%. If you tell it, I only want you to look at document X and provide me with Y, it will only ever look at document X.
Okay.
So my case maybe was having some flaws somewhere because I was not uploading the files to that main page, but I was rather creating a model which was like a new model. I was updating the configuration with 5 files, but then he was still having this hallucination because even if I was asking from where you got this information, give me the document that I teach you, give me the page. He was giving me this database. I was going to the document to that page, and there was no such text there. So I was so confused that I'm trying to create new model with 5 files being a source of information for him, but I'm still getting this hallucination. But that was 4.0, and it was like 4 months ago. So maybe,
might have
now it
changed.
will be work. Yeah, I need to try it.
God, typos today. What was that?
Look at easier.
No, because it's not on my screen.
No.
So here's the same thing here. So it's now moving into retrieval optimum strategy based on size provided. So now it's doing a chunking strategy. Don't need to know about that. It's taking that document and moving it into a space, and then it's pulling my Minstrel 7B instruct 0.5 to actually then use the large language model. So this is an LLM Studio, so I know a few of you downloaded it and set up. It's now running everything. And this is what it's hurting my poor laptop. It's like, it's probably going to be on fire by the end. Let me see if it's using the NP. And suddenly, it's just going to absolutely ransack your CPU. Oh, it's using about 20% of the NPU at the moment. But it's actually, as it reads that information, it's pulling it all that as in that core top of the range laptop is having to ingest that file and create a strategy to just read that file. Obviously, within ChatGPT, to then allow straight away access that document. But if I pull this down and run it in my environment, it will have to go through. There's no chance it's going to do anything but hit that Minstrel of Experts 7B instruct large language model. So that's my first recommendation. My second one.
Is that the only way to guarantee that it won't go outside the documents you load?
Streaming, but I could turn it off, and that's why you know what's going on here. Now, if you decide you want to go to GitHub, now me and Paul fight over this, you download local GPT, type in local GPT repo, it will use say what you would use using the Gemini model. But you can also see, which is what he uses, I don't like it, it sucks. Pull the repo down, all of this running on your local machine, but actually you're able to, it's got all the APIs, it's got all the, and it'll use any model you want on it. But like you can see, this is going to take absolutely forever to just ingest that doc, which is the vector database store. And that then, in essence, turns that into a horrible MySQL bloody file at the end of it, which you can see because it's on your local drive once you've finished. But anyway, what we're caring about at the moment is we want to get everyone your own account, which will always have to say, confirm that it's your email, it's completely free. Or if you want to log in as me, feel free until it runs out of credits. And then we want to get to this point where we can upload a document. Now, it doesn't have to be that NOP e-commerce document. It could be anything. And what I was kind of saying to some guys during the lunch break was the way that I create sources of knowledge. So information is about stuff that's in your ecosystem. Right, so if you go to Jira, go to the jQuery and say, give me all my test tickets, and you could literally go through and say, you know, or go to the defects and say which defects are similar to each other, tests, here's the information that sits within your organization about what you're doing. Knowledge, testing standards, all the testing terminology, which is Paul's. Well, I'll put the URL on later, but he's got a TK-com / terms, I think is what it is. I'll put it on the website. .com /terms. And what he's done, which is, you know, is using terminology from ISTQB to ISEB to the whole ISO, BSI, and he's resolved each one. So if you type in pairwise testing or you type in boundary different definitions, but we've fed those all into that CSV file of the sources of knowledge. So you don't have to use Paul's database anymore because it's not up. It's not up because what, of your shoddy coding skills? This is what you're saying. My lack of internet. Well, that also doesn't help. But under here, you've got testing terms and testing terms.csv. And if I just can work out, I really wish I brought my mouse or a cat or something. But if I go into here, I go into this bit here. Terms.pkbase.com. Is it? That is. Okay, right up there. So I don't know. It's Excel. Who uses it? But anyway, every single one of these definitions is in there around a real thing. Except it's just really abuse case. Yeah, sounds a bit harsh. Yeah, but I mean, people, hackers do all sorts of stuff. I think it's maybe something to do with that. It says the use case in which some actors with malicious intent or cause harm. Okay, whatever. Anyway, so part you can feed, then he knows test it, but he doesn't really know. So do you understand the technique test analysis? And it's yeah, and it gave me a
okay, and I gave it an example. A number varies between 1 and 100, and between 0 and 10 it does this, 11 to 50 does that, 51 to 100, can you identify the boundary values? And it said, no, I can't do it. However, if you just ask it flat, it doesn't do test design. It's a language model. That's its problem, I think.
And this is the whole reason why
you need a test model or
you feed this in, is you can say to it, okay, ATED, if you read Elizabeth Hendrickson's Explore It book, she has it how to do acceptance driven testing, which is in essence underneath it, you say the password is an example of the password.
Yeah, it's a whole sort of checklist, anyway.
Yeah, and so part of it is just really useful to kind of again say to it, I only want you to think about testing terms, and I only want you to look at my application. I want you to create me some ad hoc testing or some adversarial. Not great.
If you build those checklists into the RAM, and then you could say using these as a list of typical test cases, and then maybe review and stick with a jump, and then go from there. But that's the game you're in at the moment.
Okay.
At the moment.
At the moment. And this is why we kind of said at the moment, because these things are going to evolve very quickly. Right? So I think, hands, is everyone on ChatGPT now? Yeah.
I don't see your hands.
Who is not?
Who's not? We'll put that down. Okay, okay. Right. So, example one of my unfortunate lunch break, which was, I'm going to have to shut down LLM Studio. Poor LLM Studio. Doing so well, but then it got to 80. Oh, this entire ecosystem. So Death Valley it did, which is the worst possible thing in the entire world, as we've all talked about. I just literally said to ChatGPT, and I want people to do the same here. We're going to try and improve it because we already kind of explained how to improve it. I said to it, well, create me a Selenium script to test demo.nopcommerce.com and search for a product, right? Seems like a very sensible, kind of simple prompt. Not very great prompt, in all fairness. Not my greatest hour. But obviously I got this. And I got this and went, oh, well, I know what it is. I know it's in Python. It says it in the top left-hand corner. It's not just because I'm awesome at Python. But I looked at it and I went, that won't work. And I know that because I've done it before. So I pasted this into Cursor, which I've mentioned to people before, to say, use Cursor, because Cursor will really help you get the next. Jesus. Different resolutions on different screens is not cool, Microsoft. Yeah, maybe. So what you see in the red is the original code that it gave me. For those eagle-eyed Selenium people, you'll notice that it was a previous version of Selenium we went into. And so I then said to cursor.com, not the cursor that you move left and right on your keyboard. I said to it, okay, why is it not working for laptop when I searched for laptop? And it went through and it made a recommendation of what should be in the code and then applied it. And also, you can see, it also added in some assertions, which is if laptop is not found, come up with an error, I'll just do something else. So it added some assertions into it. So in essence, what my step was me going to ChatGPT and saying, create a Selenium script. Didn't say in Python, in JavaScript, didn't say what version it was. I just said to it, I want to go to demo.nopcommerce.com and I want you to search for a product, which he decided a laptop was obviously what I wanted. Next iteration, I go in here, I'm into my Copilot for testing. This is completely free. You can see it's running offline again. And then it gave me the recommendation to then be able to run it. Obviously, then I realized that I haven't actually got Selenium installed on my machine, so I got as far as that. But so that's how you would iteratively kind of move from, in essence, something which is just sent to you by ChatGPT to something that hopefully is a bit more useful. Now, of course,
sorry, John. Could you add that into your kind of process training to do it automatically? Is there an API to feed it the output from ChatGPT and say cursor do your stuff and then take that out?
Yeah, all command lines, but that's the thing.
You could do that.
Yeah, you could do that.
That's the human element. Like, I really don't want to be doing this. I would expect ChatGPT to sort this out.
Yeah.
But they obviously can't.
But this can't run anything. This isn't a development tool. This is just a large language model. Yeah. So passing it to a development IDE to say run it, and if you get an error, pass the error to cursor, and then cursor needs to go up and fix it, and do that as many times as it needs until it passes.
You could.
Of course. Yeah. Now the problem is the problem which we just said, which is, does it just make it pass, or does it do some assertions, check that laptop appeared, check that it's actually running a valued script? Because making it work and getting a return code of 0 is not the end goal. So humans have to be involved in this. So now we're all humans and we're at this point. What I think we should start with, because this is kind of the end goal, is to get some code. You don't have to be an automation engineer, right? As much as I spent the last 25 years only doing that. But what would be a better prompt for creating a better script for this? Anybody? Anybody want to have a crack at it and then actually see if they can make it run on their machine? And I'd be surprised if you could get it running on your machine. See the people who've got Selenium installed who are really interested.
Who's got Selenium or a test tool installed on their machine?
Right, anyone? Okay. Visual Studio Code? Has anyone learned the cursor on? No? Okay. Really? Oh, yeah, that's a little thing. All right, so let's, how we put it on, let's just start with a basic prompt, right? So before we did the state transition diagram. That's what we did on the last, before we all went for lunch. We did a state transition diagram, and it was quite nicely, and I have to give thanks to the person who added this to the biro board. But if I wanted to create a test now for testing a failed payment or a successful payment, what kind of script, what kind of message would I want to type in there? Or, yeah, that's you.
I asked the question, Gary.
Okay, tell me what
I can't read it, but that's from here.
That's because.
What's that say? Which way do these arrows go?
It goes from here to up here, and then it's going either to.
You're going to do two paths, aren't you? I think.
So you're trying to say, give me the positive and negative paths.
So that's one path, and that's the other. I don't know which is negative and positive. But to cover that diagram, if all these arrows in the same direction, there are only two paths, and you'll end up with two dead states. You might end up at a home page.
So is that what you're saying? Is that what you think?
If you just wanted to cover that model, that's the only way of doing it. Because once you hit one, the animation goes to the next one in sequence.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So I don't know. That's the question. This is why we're in this workshop, right?
Yeah.
So what's happened here is we got this. The question we had over the lunch is it's a dog with a bone, because the last question I asked was to create Selenium. I've now asked it to create a positive and a negative use case. It's already made the assumption that if I want the output to be in Selenium. Obviously, I haven't asked it to create it in Selenium. It's just because the thread has decided to go off. And of course, you can see here, it's now got a positive and a negative use case. It's now generating the negative use case to simulate a failed payment transaction.
But is it following those two paths?
Yes. Okay. It's added an item to a cart. It's going from cart to billing address. It's passing on all the billing address, the phone numbers, the shipping, and then it, hopefully, once it gets down to here, it will get to the payment method, incorrect payment information provided, put the wrong expiry date in, print, it's now tested a negative path because it's got a negative payment value.
So for from my perspective, that's great, but it's just gone through those two paths.
Yep.
But there's probably 100 ways it could deviate from those paths to end up with the same outcome.
Exactly. So was that a good test to write?
It's a start. But I mean, if you look at the variation in the data values that influence the behaviour of that product, there could be failure points at any level, at any point in that.
Okay.
Which may or may not be in the requirements. I don't know, but I don't know. But there's a lot more to be done. But it's a start, and you've got a script that you could, refactor maybe to make it repeatable and to do other variations.
Okay.
So can we do classification trees?
Of course I can. It couldn't. It's the whole. So you're saying here you could have invalid credit card, expired credit card, insignificant funds, which is my normal problem, and then more important, the classification tree gives you the flow chart of what you need to do.
Okay.
And it's now giving me sample invalid credit card numbers as test data that I could potentially use.
Okay.
So is this a good test?
But what classification trees? I think the way it's done it, no one uses classification trees, do they?
I use classification. I just used it. How relevant can you get it?
Because all they are, in effect, is just a snazzy way of looking at equivalence petitions. So I don't think it's looking at boundaries.
Well, it's not doing. This is a classification, not doing boundary.
No. But the elements there could be boundary values.
Yeah.
So within, let's say, the first branch on the left,
Payment method. Yeah.
these could be. That could be. I know it says invalid and expired, but that could be valid minimum value, valid maximum value.
Yeah, it could be Amex is 4 digits, and the rest are 3 digits.
So there are many more ways you could have an invalid card. That's what I would expect. So you could just type in insufficient numbers. That's invalid. Put in characters, put in
wildcards,
special, anything you like. So there's probably 20 different ways you could get a payment. Sorry, that's
invalid card.
Invalid card. Sorry, invalid card.
But it's a invalid card number, not the card itself.
Yeah.
What you're entering into the system
is an invalid card number, right?
So that's good. Look, sorry, is this the journey you're on?
No, I'm just trying to see, is anybody in the audience? It's like, if we now wanted to go down to that next level, do you ask it, I'll let you do it, it's at the front, do you ask it to create, based on the document you've done, valid and invalid card numbers, 10 of them, one for Amex, Visa, and MasterCard, would it give you a set of test data in a CSV file with parity checking and everything else on the card? Well, then try it. I can't walk all the way over there. Go on. Paul, you walk all the way over there. You're not getting any younger. So how would you get the test data to get the right set of valid and invalid?
I can't see that here.
You just type in that box.
What box? There's no box. It's.
Oh,
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking me.
So if we were saying,
you know what we're going to do.
Provide test data in CSV format for valid and invalid credit card number.
That's what you've got now.
Numbers.
So that's not going to add any value. What you want is to say,
for Amex.
you've given me equivalence petitions, valid versus invalid, but there's many ways of the card being invalid.
Yeah.
So I would have typed, I don't realize what you want to, now I understand. I would have said, how many ways can a card be valid? A credit card number. And do you remember Graham Thomas?
Yeah, I remember Graham.
He said there are nine security measures on a card.
Which is the parity checking.
No. If you look very, very carefully, there's very tiny print on the outside of the card. And there's lots of things that are actually physically on the card, which are security measures. It told me. You need good eyesight, though, to see them.
Exactly. But, part of it is that's the parity checking problem with MasterCard, right? Is MasterCard starts 51505, but because of the numbers at the end, the parity doesn't add up with all the other ones. And this is the whole problem, right? Is you need to know, I know nothing about credit card transaction processing, but if you're in that industry,
there's
You
probably
need to
100 different
know
ways you could do that.
Swift messages, whatever else is, you need to understand what valid and invalid looks like. But what we're building up here is we're building up, we want to do a test case. We went down the route of saying we want to do a state transition diagram because we want to understand how the application works. It provided us a model of how it thinks the application works. We then asked it, could you do, in essence, a classification trees to show us how you could go down that route? It identified a negative permutation. The negative permutation was invalid credit cards, which was just one of many. It could be the invalid funds. And then we've asked it to create test data that we could then embed into our Selenium scripts to then try all these different permutations with a negative and a positive test, valid and invalid test data.
So for every field on the screen in the payment section, the credit card number, the expiry date, the
address,
the code, the three-digit code, all have validation rules. So you can just say, I'm just worried about validation, and for each one of those, maybe not, I don't know, that ChatGPT could identify legitimate test values that exercise one of these validation rules, and then you're happy because then everything else is valid, and then you only need one example of valid. But then there may be other rules behind the scenes.
But this is the whole thing. Is this is an iterative approach. I think we were talking, the people we talked over for lunch and stuff is, you're going to go through 6 or 7 prompts to get to your end goal, right? Yeah. And you're going to have these, we're calling them templates because you decided to call them templates.
Well, I would say in your commerce or any e-commerce site, you've got the rules for credit card processing, and each field will have its own set of rules, and you could reuse them again and again. And so you put a prompt for each one of those to generate not random, but the legitimate valid versus invalid values.
So are you saying that within your application, if I've got an application, and it doesn't have to be a retail application, is that I should have prompts specific to certain parts of the application?
I think you just call them objects and they're reusable. If you were doing regular test automation, you'd have a little function that said invalid, the 25 invalid, which would generate 25 invalid credit card numbers. So you're just kind of mapping prompts to functions in some code, and once you've got that, you can then add to your prompts. By the way, use this function to generate legitimate invalid values of your credit cards again and again and again. So you're just growing with the product in that you're consolidating all these big pieces of content into simple prompts which are reusable. Or just the output. Maybe the prompt is necessary once you've got the output. I'm just thinking like a programmer, writing code, so you don't have to reinvent all these things every time. That's the point.
So what we want to, it would be nice to get people onto Miro just pasting in a few prompts to be able to create some test scenarios. Now, if we look at the annoying ChatGPT's recommendation next steps, it now thinks, can you create more test cases, test scenarios is one of the suggestions that it's come up with. And obviously it's got a dog with a bone. It's like what other payment failures can happen, right?
Just run out of ideas.
Yeah, it's kind of in that thread, right? But try and do what we've just done and try and create a prompt to map the application. So we've said state transition diagram, but you don't have to use that. We've shown the classification tree. All we're saying to it is good, and I'm going to do this, everyone can do this, themselves. But, I can go into a completely different app. So I'm in Microsoft Copilot now. Please, an error occurred. And I can ask it the same thing. It doesn't know anything about the application. I'm not uploading anything. It's brand new. It's completely empty. And I can then ask it, create state transition diagram for demo.nopcommerce.com. And this has Copilot has no understanding of the document I've uploaded because I haven't uploaded a document. This is now going and using the internet and actually just trying to create the flow. And as you can see, it's come up with a very rudimentary but very valid state transition diagram of going from home page, click on a product page, cart, checkout, order confirmation.
Well, in effect, that's just a state table, which it can be transformed into a diagram.
Yeah. So, as you can see, I've only done one channel there. So let's see if we can get better diagram quality, better state transition diagram, and a better prompt for a test to create test against NOP-commerce demo.NOP-commerce, I think it is. And we'll give everyone 7 minutes because that's exactly what it says on there. I reckon there's a stopwatch function. Here we go. Online stopwatch.com gets my data. Seven, 0, 0, 0.
That's 70 minutes.
Next, we'll automate this. 7, 0, 0. And we can now buy these products at the side as well while we're waiting. Okay, let's get on that one. And obviously, if we can get, I'll put my row up. So if people are putting, the first person who does put their prompts on for creating a test case will win a little Paddington bear, which is worth the value of nearly nothing, would be the answer to that problem. We would have had longer if it weren't that we ran to the gate, isn't it? That's the problem. Okay, so we've got, these are up here. Just throw them up when you've got them. And I'm going to peel the prices off so I don't feel like such a cheapskate. They're cute though. Are you doing it as well? Because you can't win anything.
I'm thinking
Oh, there's another Paddington here. This is 3 whole Paddingtons, by the way. I'll put the little Paddington in the middle. Yeah. Sure. That's lovely, yeah. Great. Okay, so you've actually got well done. She's literally got the Selenium running of the output for NOP commerce. Congratulations, you're definitely the first winner, and you get this, which I'll take the price off as well, which is a Lego version of the English Cross. Well done. So what was interesting is she went through, created the state transition diagram, the classification trees, then got the code, then ran the code. It ran, but then Cloudflare came up with, are you a human? And then the browser shut down. So in actual fact, not really anyone's fault apart from Cloudflare for sitting at the front of the NOP commerce domain. Very well done. That's what we tried to. Well, I was asking you to do over lunch, but you were resetting your bank account or something, making withdrawals. We got ages. We've got a lifetime still to go. That was a record, though. Oh, look, I've got some click ads. Oh, my God. What? Oh, my God. Now got a virus on it. I don't know. It's like your website, Paul. And look how it's got milliseconds in the corner. So my friend has candymapper.com, if you've ever used this application. And it has a pop-up thing which comes up. And it's all about, which you'll see my name somewhere at the bottom on here. Eventually at the bottom. Never mind. Anyway, this is a website for people who want to get through problems with Shadow DOM and all sorts of other stuff. And it's actually quite a good little. There's loads of issues on the actual website if you ever want to test out your automation skills. Yeah, let's go back to the timer. Spooky service takes forever to load. 3 more minutes. Come, Paul. You got 3 more minutes. That's a whole lifetime. Oh, look, Oleg's might have just annihilated the entire world by creating the most complex diagram I've ever seen in my entire life. Oh, that is seriously impressive. Did someone use DALL-E to do this? Who did this one? Who did it? What I love about DALL-E is DALL-E obviously has a serious problem with words. So like Haven Tackard, chewing car, that's where you just eat stuff.
There's a shopping chit gout. In the middle, towards the right.
Order flailed. For sale?
Puzzled.
DALL-E is just horrendous.
How was that?
Well, no, because within ChatGPT-O, it has the capability to create images. So if you ask it to create a diagram with an image, it will create using the DALL-E components, and then it generates that, which is horrendously funky. Which is why if you go into it and say, where is he? This one. That's NLP Commerce. Don't do it in that chat. What's that? So this is embedded. Anytime you see this button, unfortunately, typically it means it's called DALL-E to try and generate an image. And so nicely done. It's generated the ISO 29119 as a Lego set, which is brilliant. You've got test planning, test design, continuous testing, running control, whatever that is. Brilliant.
That's all the action going on the Mario.
Yeah, it's loads. We got.
I'm just trying to find some space. Just anywhere.
Well, yeah, anywhere.
Okay.
Oh, there's another one there. This looks like a seating plan. Oh, I'm liking this. Stay.
I've just put something in. I don't know. I don't use this.
And someone's using Copilot as well, which is impressive. What else have we got in this? Some are definitely bigger than others. Oh, there's one here.
Some code, but it's in there somewhere. But I can't find it.
That's just a big question mark, exclamation mark. It is a bit funky with its file extension stuff. That's pretty. Oh, who's doing this one over here? Oh, that was a proper state transition diagram.
To the right. Down a bit to the right.
Here.
No, it's a plain white one. It's not clear.
Here.
It's just a text box. I can't read that.
Oh, this is impressive.
Starts with import async IO.
Oh, that's Claude.
That's someone else.
Where?
I don't know where it is. There's a big batch of images, which is, I think that's your laptop. And that's just to the right of that.
Okay. Well, I'll have a look in a second. I like that one. That's nice. The funny thing about this is quite impressive. Whose is this? Whose? Who did this one? You can take credit for your own artwork. This one here. Okay, well done. So this is quite impressive because it's pulling out test data from the actual code. And so some of these things, the Lumia 120 is the sample data that it's actually found on the website for the test data based on the thing at the front. It's quite impressive.
I should include that in STQB. Teach people that.
It's also got the layers of user interface and downwards out the back.
I mean, but that's somewhere on the internet. There's an image that looks similar.
No,
to that.
no, no.
It's stolen that.
No, this is purely DALL-E. DALL-E will just generate images all day long if it has to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can I ask a very stupid question? Why do you do all this with no sense?
It is true. I think what we've realized is that, and I can't share people's other stuff, but partly, where are we going? Where did I lose my? Completely lost that thread. Never mind. Partly what we were trying to get done was this, right? A state transition diagram. But what the problems most of you have done is it's actually created an image. Now the image is no use, right? It's partly just an image. It's generated, and this is the problem: is if you tell ChatGPT to create a state transition diagram image, it will create an image. Whereas here, this is something useful because you've got the raw.
You want the table.
You want the table, right? But it's your prompts that are going to be saying, like if I change this prompt now to ask it, because it did say to me, blah, blah, if you need a more detailed specific diagram, create, and this is what we talked about, XPDL diagram. If I now ask it to create an XPDL diagram, what it's actually going to create at the bottom of this transition thing is it's going to create that complex flow, but as an XPDL landscape. Now, obviously, that isn't very good, because that's only one flow. The whole point of an XPDL file is it shows you every single transition that it does through the system. Once you've got that, you can open that file up in a model because it's a unified modeling notation. But again, the prompt wasn't strong enough, and also because of how limited it knows about the application, it's a very small amount. Now, I don't know where my previous prompts have gone.
If you do a refresh, you'll see mine.
Oh, it's because you've been butchering our account. Yeah.
So testable, that's what I did. We just go to the top. I'm not saying this is the best way, don't get me wrong. But I just said, what are the testable features of not commerce?
They're both not commerce.
I gave you a list and I said, well, give me some test cases for number 7. And then I said, write some code.
Okay, so you went into telling us the testable activities.
Yeah.
Then you went into
I said
create test cases for discounts, promotions, and coupons.
Yeah, well, I actually said requirement 7 or whatever it was.
Okay.
Which is interesting because it translated that.
Okay.
Coupon codes. Okay.
So you've now got some tests that are applying coupons.
Yeah.
And then you asked for some code.
Yeah, I said give some code for whichever one of those steps.
So you then referred to it as a test case 5, apparently.
Yeah, test case. Yeah.
And then it gave you the code to actually run the page.
So what I didn't say before is on the slides and the stuff I did a few days ago, I actually said provide a user manual for how I would integrate this into a larger test environment. And it gave some pretty good advice, I have to say. It recognizes what you need to do, like replace my invented variable names with your own and put real data in there. So it was kind of fun.
Okay, let's have a look.
It needs some. I don't think it's got.
I don't know, I'm going to put it in here, see what it says. New file. Play, right. Paste it in here. And then what I'm going to do
This
is
just one test case, isn't it? You can write written code to could have asked to alternate all the tests as well.
So all I've done is I've pasted that into Cursor, and then I've told it to go to Cursor chat. So it's now, what should happen is that test apply multiple coupons function that you've done. I can now ask it about questions about that, like what test data should I have, etc. Let me do a new one. This is the import one, which we don't care about. We care about this one.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, this is what I'm looking
We
at.
checked it.
Into new chat, sorry. So now it's telling me, the data set that I could potentially insert into here is invalid code 123, a quarterly discount code for autumn and summer. So by just doing these couple of steps, now of course if I click play, want to play right on again, it will come up with an error, but I could then pass that error across, which is what we said. So it's saying module not found. I then go back into here and say, and it'll tell me to use pip and install playwright to resolve that issue.
But the previous dialogue you had before, when you said giving some test data, that's where I think you could have a script which will give you a list of all the legitimate test values for a coupon. Because it will have read the requirements, look to the format requirement, and come up with variations that sound good.
Yeah.
And you could add to that as well. And
Yeah.
I think that's if you're getting into the modularization stuff, it's giving you lots of snippets of the problem, and you just have to pull it together yourself as a human, almost. So I think integration is what humans do. I think maybe generating code is what
it's all human led. That's the whole point behind it. You need to look over the content that's being generated and say it's good. Now, to your point, you just asked it to create some test cases. You didn't know if those test cases were valid or invalid. You didn't probably read them. They looked okay, so you went after test case 5, which was coupons, and then you just went after it. Now, obviously, I then went to the opposite side, and I went, oh, well, I'll create some test data for coupons. And it told me to put invalid coupon 1, 2, 3 in, but also summer and winter. Again, they may not be valid into the system.
Yeah.
So the whole point is, which is why we've got the NOP document, is if I open up that NOP document now quickly again, I should be able to, well, exactly. So if I go into here, I should be able to search for coupon, and I should be able to then see, which I know sounds like a really lame thingy, is that I now, the documentation that it's pulled from NOP Commerce, it knows in the common panel, you can set a discount box showing the discount coupon thing. So within here, there's a whole stack of rules, including not just the discount box, the coupon box. They call it a discount box. It's not a coupon box. There's also a gift card box. And obviously you'd expect the gift cards to be in a certain format as well. And that's why it's so important to have documentation and the information about the actual system so that it can refer to valid data, not just making stuff up.
I think also if you're in a development environment and you're testing early versions,
Yeah.
and someone has a bright idea of adding the coupon code,
Yep.
you could say at the conversation, okay, well, what's the format, and then I can test it, and then you could add that to the right.
And it should be, it should be in
Or
the
add all the
Jura.
document and reload.
It should be in the ATDED or.
Well, you hope so, but quite often these things just get passed from mouth to mouth.
Well,
mouth to ear.
That's the same thing. So the example which we gave, which is using a transcript from a Teams call, is you could then feed that in and say, oh, well, Bob said to Pete that we're not calling it coupon code anymore, we're calling it discount box. And like, who made that decision? It was the product owner on a whim for no real reason, but everything else on the system refers to it as coupon.
The day after Jill says to Jack, that's a load of cobblers, let's do something else.
Yeah. But it's not being formalized in a software development lifecycle, right? So this is why software is so hard to develop, is because it's got these layers.
This knowledge is distributed.
And part of it is not everyone has the same information about the systems, right? Anyway, that was hopefully a little example of how that kind of fits. Now,
Is anyone doing that?
what do you mean?
Is anyone in the room doing that?
I think everyone's had a crack at it.
No, I mean, back at the ranch. I mean, of those of you who said you're using AI in your job, is anyone going down this path? Generating code, test code, and run tests? Yeah. The chap we spoke to earlier on.
Yeah. He's already doing it, yes.
So is that? And is it working?
Is it working?
So,
Is it valuable, do you think, or do you think it helps, or do you think that causes more work? Yeah, maybe it does. Higher work, maybe. Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's it's really good. Oh, good point.
When I now maybe use compiler, and in the other
Yeah.
it's not so generic like you explain now. So you just provide some file and generate something. So how I use compiler is, for example, in your engineering, it's like that. So you just provide context, some specific lines, some specific files, some specific step definition. It works like complete. So it's going to complete. So I don't say fine. So you just start,
Yeah.
and this is like for me what I would provide. Also, for example, if I would like to use some method. I know what I need, but I need the text in next.
Yeah.
I ask how I write it. And if we need them from this example, I could use it. Also, for example, I could write here. I would like to use E for this condition, write E for me. To write E for me. And when I could write it in sugar, he will write in sugar. Like, well, also how very often I use it personally when I do it with I could ask sometimes explain me this method.
Yeah.
Or I could ask which users to do that using here. Or if sometimes I couldn't answer it, like you could use this method here to write some code inside of it. I could ask explain me what here is explain what he is doing, what this method does.
Yeah.
So,
I think you've just hit on what I think is probably the most powerful capability within this landscape is giving it code and asking it to explain what that code is, and in essence help document. Because we know what people are like. Typically, the complexity is lost. There's never enough time to do it. But actually, fully understanding what the code is doing is also quite important.
it's not clear.
Yeah.
I do in one line. If you just provide a result from generic, it's really the I will not
Yeah.
which is just created. But if you know the way of the code and you provide your details, then it's really good.
so can you ask that sort of another thought? I'm sorry.
Then I could
You don't take the code, or maybe the text description before the code, to generate a video of what the test will look like. Show me, tapping from field to field, filling in fields, pressing the button, and then seeing it, and then pointing to this is the code. I mean, you've got to understand what it's doing, because some tests can be very complicated.
So what I've done in Cursor here is what you can do is you can ask it a question. So I've just said, add documentation to this code, right? And so now I'm just going to apply it, which is here. And what it's going to do is it'll show me the previous version, which is red, and the new version. What you can see is it's added the code notes description to what this is going to do is going to launch a browser, navigate to the site, add an item to the cart. So in essence, but I think what you're saying, which is much more useful, is you need to you're very focused on it. So you might say, well, explain to me how the multiple coupon process works. You know, you want to be able to kind of get a better, more richer understanding of what it's doing. Now, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole with code. You can see it's running Claude at the moment, because I think not everyone wants to be able to generate code as an output. You know, part of the lessons that we're trying to learn is lessons that are around kind of, well, what are the prompts that we're wanting to get to? What are the, you know, the questions? How are we refining it? How are we doing? And I want to answer a few questions while we've got the questions in here. The last one that came in from AI, which must be that AI is asking questions on AI. You know, is there already a model with feed information? And this was the test terms that which you did. So what we've been working on over the last couple of years is actually building out the model for all the boundary value analysis, everything else, how it all fits together.
Is that perfect for humanity?
Well, I think this is the whole point. Is, you know, to me, if you're wanting to be the value add in the future, right, you want to have this kind of tech sat behind it. It isn't the perfect humane, but the difference is, you know, if you don't know about autonomous vehicle driving level 3, you want to lean on these models to say, well, I'll pull this model here about automotive. I know testing, but I also want to bring the testing model in. I know Gherkin, I know this, I know that, I'll pull these in. At a certain point, you're going to be outside your comfort zone. You might say, I don't know security testing, right? And so we said earlier, during the break, we said, okay, if there's one of the things Jason does is when he goes onto a website, it runs a security assessment, right? Which is, I'll show you your example in a minute, which is really good. You know, and so it looks at it and says, okay, I found a security vulnerability in the transposing of the directory structure. Well, what does that mean? You know, how important is that to what's the risk? What's the impact? What should I raise in the defect? Who should I give it to? And then I might say, oh, well, I'll pull in my OWASP stuff and I'll say, based on the severity, what is the severity of this issue? And then the next prompt, which we said, was, what's the impact? What's the business impact and justification for why this is an issue? And also, how do I resolve this from a developer's perspective to remove that vulnerability? And what you're then tagging into your defect is something that's actionable. Somebody can take it. They've got an example of how it can be resolved. They've got a risk, a priority, all being based on some kind of repeatable, not perfect QA, you know, but some kind of diligent kind of system that's in place. Next question. You?
Am I asking or answering?
You can do both if you want.
You
You can read it out loud.
I
found that.
Then I'll have to answer it. Let's assume you have a mature test automation framework that has a lot of different modules, use common design patterns like POM, etc. How would you approach adding a new test scenario into the system? Well, isn't that? Maybe I'm not missing. I'm reading that and thinking, well, you've already got that. You already know that. Because you've got a mature test automation framework. There's a lot of different modules and common design patterns. Design patterns help. I think the way to get the benefit of what I would trust AI to do is do very small scale widgets, let's say, that test individual fields, validate individual fields, check certain outputs, click buttons, all that kind of stuff. Now, you're probably doing this kind of thing already if you're writing code to create your test automation. So I think AI can help with that. I'm not sure what I can say about that, except that if you've got design patterns, use them. If you haven't got a design pattern for a new scenario, create one if it's appropriate. If it's really unusual, you just have to create a unique set of code, put it to one side and call it things that we really don't like to do but have to. Okay, but that's not the name you put. But there are some things that you can't have an efficient way of building code. It's unique.
So what's also interesting, so I sat on this the other day, so I was, my friend, I was in a large bank, I'm not saying it's the Bank of England, but it could have been the Bank of England. And there was all this huge automation framework, and they had over 700 dependencies in the library build. It was a monster, right? And they had lots of people who were implementing and working on it and building test cases, right? And so I kind of came in and looked at what I would class as the Star Destroyer, the Death Star of automation frameworks. And I was like, well, partly what they wanted to do was they wanted to be able to run it into some kind of CI/CD process, right? Which is pretty boring. No one's really interested for a second. But part of it is it's all continuous testing, right? So you've got this huge automation framework, but you want to run tests. Let's call it the test what you just written, which is, what was it? Coupon testing. Okay, so you add that coupon testing, and maybe you are doing some behavior-driven testing, some jerking. Maybe you're not, right? Maybe you're just submitting a playwright script. Now, of course, to your kind of question, you could say, okay, well, this is what our normal code looks like. You call it design patterns, right? You could give it a sample of what looks good, what other people submit, but then you could also apply that pattern. So you could say, this is the code, how I like it to be structured, and with these kind of capabilities. So for instance, if you were using Alert or using reportportal.io or test.ng, or you were writing it into some kind of Zephyr squads reporting thing, you might have a certain way your organization wants to report on execution, root cause analysis, pinpoint method analysis, actionable. Okay, if I run this, is it bad if it fails? Is it good? What does it look like compared to the previous last run? And I think this is where we suddenly unlock AI, is because AI can take all of that horrible runtime data, let's call it Log4j for a second,
Process stuff.
and read in the previous run and this run and say, well, what was the difference? And it could say, well, actually, when I ran it, it's 12% slower running in the login module than it was this time last week. But actually, it's incrementally getting 12% slower over the last 16 runs. And you see, AI is great at taking unstructured data, a large set of unstructured data, and say to it, what's interesting about this?
And give me something structured that I can deal with.
Exactly. And so partly what I would say to that kind of question, we've got a very mature automation framework already. We say, well, what is it? What extra you want to be able to get? What kind of insight do you want to get out of the running? Because part of it is running test automation tests. It's an insurance, it's a nice blanket. I don't know who it was yesterday, but saying, oh, I've got 9,000 tests. Fantastic. Part of it is, well, why have you got 9,010 tests? And you could talk about test case optimization. You could talk about modeling and coverage and all that kind of stuff. But really what you're trying to do is provide some type of insight which you would not normally get. So if you want to get into visual testing, you might have Aptly tools on there and say, okay, well, I want to see if my icon, my corporate logo is changing on a Firefox variant. You might care about that. You might care about accessibility. You might care about other kind of components. But anyway, as we got lots of questions on it, that was the one that kind of popped up, but I'm going to bring it back up for the question because you've definitely answered that one. I'll give you that one. That's your first answered question all day. Otherwise, you've just been saying it depends, which it also does depend. No, I'm sorry. I'm just opening up the page, so we've got the actual Slido questions. Okay, so we've got this top question at the moment, which I'm going to get out of the way. So and then we'll quit it. We'll get out to the rest of them. So what's the pros and cons of using a free version of a large language model versus a paid version in the context of software testing, particularly regarding performance, data privacy, customization, integration, and existing test tools? So we had this partial conversation at the lunch, which was like, well, what is the value of pulling something down like local GPT or private GPT and then running that into your own ecosystem? Well, there's a lot of advantages. First, your laptop there is air-gapped, so you can pass it confidential material and not worry about potentially getting into a lot of trouble for sharing confidential information. So there's a lot of value of bringing it down. Secondly, what we've been showing today is that actually it's a lot about getting the data into the format that you can then process it with the system. So actually getting the information about the testing terms, getting the information from the ISTQB document, you can start feeding the information in. You can't do that with ChatGPT. You can't pass it all your Confluence and SharePoint forms because you probably get into a lot of trouble as well. So part of it is there's a lot of value of bringing Now you might say, well, what's the value, what's the argument that could be said for paid? Well, first of all, unlike my LLM Studio, is it didn't take 40 minutes to eventually process and understand that document, and then eventually give me the ability to say it's 2.77 tokens per second, 125 tokens, 74.48 seconds to first token. That's the performance of my machine, in essence, is based on the measurement of tokens per second. If I've got a larger set of data sets, that's going to take longer to process. And that's the whole point. If you've got 15 mega files, that's going to take a lot longer than 100K. So if you see here, I've now got loaded into my memory 1,598 tokens with information, right? In essence, is what I've got. So the bigger the size, the longer it takes, the more you need specialist equipment, because you might not want to have to wait 30, 40 seconds for a prompt to go back. If you've got ChatGPT, you're going to get that instantaneously because they've got a whole stack of T100 cards which are going to process that like butter. So part of the challenge is weighing up that whole, what's the advantage of having a full private model. Now, I would still argue that 9 out of 10 times I would want to use a private model. But there's probably some edge cases where you want to be able to just use ChatGPT just for its speed and convenience. But I'd probably not highly recommend that if you were.
Dimensions, as well as private versus cloud, and one of this in the cloud, paid versus free. The paid versus free is like all software. You get more for your money, you get more functionality, you get more performance. You suddenly get a bigger allocation of tokens that you can process, and that's that. The other features that you were talking about security, privacy in particular, private versus public. Again, if you want it to be private, you've got to have close to yourself, and then you have the problems of trying to build a massive data center to do good work. Anyway, that's all I would add. But these are different dimensions, and I think they're the same for all software. Versus SaaS, software as a service.
Just to summarize the privacy question, so there is no feasible way to understand how data will be exposed if you use a public sector.
It's not clear how it's used. I think we're told it takes your content, parks it somewhere private, and never exposes it. However, the knowledge it gains from reading it does become public. I think. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of. So it states in the terms and conditions that, in essence, the data that is used to improve its algorithm, in essence, right, it doesn't become the testing training data set, which is fine. So in essence, you've not got to worry too much. However, I still think the whole point of the European Union AI Act was to say your data should not leave your private environment. And so therefore, the way they mitigated that was by having OpenAI in Azure tenanted environments. However, if you read the Azure tenanted environment, it said you're still responsible for the security of the platform, the infrastructure. So even though they will recommend good practice, you don't know whether or not somebody then alters that and then has an elevated rights to access things they shouldn't be accessing, and therefore also steals customer data or private data. So
I think with this, if you look at the privacy notice on OpenAI, from memory, and it's not 100%, but my recollection is it says we do not use your data in any way other than to improve the performance of our models. So it does use it when it thinks, oh, that's really interesting, or that's really helpful, or that's something new. I mean, who knows what these criteria are? But it does, some of it does get into that public training.
Well, that's the whole point. They've said 73% of all of their material was illegally on
now we know that, we're probably being a bit more careful.
Yeah, we're going to be a lot more careful, right?
And that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
But it is a good thing. And I think, I said about the AI prism, which is a small I over big S, small I big S. That framework, which has been adopted, is kind of tries to address a lot of those kind of original kind of concerns. If you use that, it's a good way to do it. Now, that brings the infinitely hard question at the top, which is around testing of AI models. So I had this question when I did the Florida event last week, the Orlando event. Someone came up to me and said, would you suggest having an AI to test the AI that you're doing, which has been the way that most people have suggested how you deal with governance and a few other things. And we at the end of this, I'm going to give you a copy of the book which we did last year, which was Artificial Intelligence for Software Testing, and that was the done with myself, Rex Black, and a few others from the working group for Standard, around how you approaches to test AI models. Now I created, which was never that good, something called gated AI, which was slicing a methodology around data sets, so having a data set for test versus development versus et cetera, around things like managing data drift over time, so things like data bias, which is if your algorithms start performing in a weird way where, let's say, female information seems to be now decisions made on insurance for 21-year-old females is now seems to be approval rate seems to be higher than it was last month. Well, why is that? The algorithm theory should have changed, but the data drift is that it happens to be a lot more females passing their test, and therefore the data with the set that it's doing, it ends up being making a higher decision rate that women should be accepted for partnership. So you will get data drift, but you don't have to measure it. So there is a number of different ways, different methodologies which I'd recommend, and that'll be in the book at the end, probably a little bit, to brain spiky for today, even though I do have some interesting brain spiky stuff later. Yep.
I don't know if the question is referring to, are we testing the embedding algorithms and the matching and the whole, the billions of transactions that are required to do something very simple? I mean, I would say we're not ever going to get to the point where we're testing it as much as the AI is testing it themselves. We're not going to get that. And why bother? But every time you put a prompt or you send a message to any of the APIs to the models, you're testing it then. In production, you're testing it. It's a bit like having an individual on your team and you ask them questions, you're checking that they're still up to date with where you are in your project. Treat it like a human. It's fallible and it needs constant supervision. So you're testing it all the time. Now, I don't know if that answers any specific question, because it's not very specific, but I think you are interacting with humans. If someone starts behaving strangely, you know there's something wrong. If the AI starts behaving strangely, you know there's something wrong. Maybe. You okay? I'm just checking with the tech. Is AI safe to use? Yes. If you don't use it in anything that it's a bit like gambling. Is gambling safe? Yeah, if you're prepared to lose all your money when you gamble, it's perfectly safe. It's not safe if you lose your house, your partner, your life. It's not safe. I don't know how to answer that, other than that if you're using it in situations where it's very high risk, I think you need to be very, very careful. So, is it safe? It's a black and white question to something that's about 20-dimensional. Is it safe to use Facebook? Some people would say, yeah,
absolutely not.
Some people would say, absolutely not.
Yeah,
it's like that.
You've watched Cambridge Analytica. I don't know why we've suddenly got over that, but it is interesting because there's a really good book on Audible called Life 3.0, which talks about the concept of safeguarding AIs, right? So I think also, not that anyone here has watched 24 apart from me and you, but the producers of 24 created a series which was also about how they put AI safeguards, and obviously narrow intelligence became general intelligence, AGI, and they were slightly concerned that it could potentially do things it shouldn't do. And one of my friends, a guy called Davey, set up a company called Calypso.ai, which was a company that came out of the Pentagon, which in essence benchmark the safety levels of AI. You know, if you're developing something that could potentially be used in a malicious kind of way, then
Sorry, I don't understand.
I think she does. That's the problem with that statement, right? Is we've not even talked to her, and she's literally going. Soon as I said something about the Pentagon, she was like, "Wait a second."
Was that from the
The Patriot Act.
Pentagon Wars last night?
Yeah, the Patriot Act is coming, so I need to be listening to what Jonathan says again. But I think that's the whole point. Is I think malicious AI. I think we're okay to a certain level. Of course, you know, one of the things what happened, the reason why I'm such a fanboy of the Minstrel of Experts model was obviously the company that put it out, they put it out in a torrent. Now, originally, they put it in a non-instruct version, so you downloaded the instruct version of the whatever it was, Google's one. The non-instruct version originally would allow you to ask it to be able to make a bomb or do anything else, and it would tell you because there was no safeguards in place for the model. Whereas what they've had to do now to comply is anything which you see as a public model, not just a torrent, anything that's on Hugging Space does go through some safety process to which they retrospectively add on at the end, like the instruct variant of chat. So there is safeguards put in to make sure that people aren't asking it questions about stuff that is unsafe. But yeah, I think it's always if we'd have had the one about ethics, we'd have been probably stuck on it for at least 30 seconds. Which one's the AI training one?
Yeah, the bottom one. I don't know what order these are coming in.
No, they're coming in as people ask it.
Okay, all right. So
That's
that's
great.
how does AI training work?
Latest question, right?
All right, okay.
I can highlight it in green, but then we won't be invited back. But yeah, so this is really interesting because people talk about training, and you don't really. We would never train a model. We would tune a model. We wouldn't train a model. So there's a difference between fine-tuning a model that already exists or a variant of something that exists to training a full model, right? Training a full model needs what Sam's doing at the moment, which is 1/3 of the entire Californian power grid. The second bit is you need to have 10,000 T100 cars running for the next 6 months. That isn't really, you can train a very small model like a 1.6, but to the standard
resources to do it.
You need a huge amount of resources. But fine-tuning doesn't. So fine-tuning is in essence is optimizing the models, reprioritize what's important. So there's, like I said, there's 2 models that I use. One which is Gherkin, a Gherkin model which is a fine-tuned variant. It's very small on Hugging Face. If you type in Gherkin, it'll come up as a fine-tuned model. That was one that we put on there because we thought it was worthwhile us feeding in Gherkin scripts. Now, depressingly enough, there's not actually that many samples of Gherkin, and you should really be doing millions of data sets, not just a couple of hundred, right? So what typically you see is these other AI models which will actually synthetically generate enough set of data that you can use to train. So in essence, obfuscates and synthetically generates billions of valid Gherkin scripts so that it can actually train against them. But again, it's not that powerful. So fine-tuning, definitely. So in the future, whoever asked the QA question, if you would love to have a tester GPT, right? That's where my head was originally, was I want one that knows boundary value analysis, it knows pairwise testing. And when I say to it, here's some information, I want you to do the result, it gives me in the right format. And it's optimized to just do testing.
I took the bottom question to be, I'm sure most of you have dealt with a chatbot. There's an AI chatbot. Like a couple of weeks ago, I had total problems with my broadband. And so I go on the website, it says, call this number, there's a little chatbot saying, can I help you? So I thought, I'll click on that. And clicked on it, and it said, hello, how are you doing? My name is somebody or other. And you say, tell me, who are you? It will validate you. And you ask it a question, say, look, I've got my program's down, what do I do? And you'll get some information. All that is a prompt saying you are an online help desk, first line of support person. Here is our process for dealing with inquiries. In case of this, you need to say, I'll hand you over to an agent who will call you in the next half hour or something like that. Now that isn't being trained so much as you're simply using the model to understand the text of conversations. And that's not a difficult thing to do. You give it your process, say, follow this process. Now what you discover is when you get frustrated. So about a month ago, I got into a dispute with a company that I paid money for like a training plan, kind of thing, which I know is going to be generated by AI. Anyway, I got confused. I cancelled the service, but I didn't get my money back. And so I asked the chatbot, I've done this, I've done that, I've done the other, whatever. And it said, yes, certainly. And then it said, it gave me a couple of questions, and then it just gave up. And then I mailed people, and they said, oh, we'll hand you over to the chatbot again. And I went, oh my God. Anyway, they owe me 100 and something pounds, 105 pounds or something. Quite, 120 euros, I don't know, something like that. I've no resolution, but I've been on the road for the last 2 weeks, so I haven't been able to get on the phone. So I have an hour-long wait before I speak to a human. But they owe me money, I've got nothing out of it. The service that I cancelled instantly, because it said, do you want a renewal? I said no, and that cancelled the service. You know? So anyway, that's an issue. Chatbots are not trained so much as they're following a process that we give it. And I don't know if that answers your question. No.
So,
Are we done with questions for a while?
no, not done it. We just I think it was a great question on the opposite flip side, with an AI, was an agent, right? And so I have part of me dies inside each time I hear the word chatbot, right? Because I think part of it is we've all seen a chatbot and we kind of hate them, right? I personally hate them. It's not my personal.
I want to love them though. I want them to be just good, and they're not very good.
Well, some of them are really good for writing code. I get onto my insurance and I'm like, write me some little Selenium. It's like, okay, yeah, here's the Selenium code.
Well,
So, yeah, that's the way they are, right? But so Jonathan.ai is, in essence, GPT-4o with the temperature turned to a bit flirty and creative, and then sat with a RAG in it. So behind the scenes, I can ask it, annoyingly, or I should be able to. What was that annoying thing we said about what's mood testing?
Yeah, mood testing.
Oops. And so I fed my bot the ISO, which is why it says mood testing is not a recognized code. Oh, well, yeah, poor Mark didn't like his day off. But anyway, so bad example with Jonathan.ai. But this is very powerful. This is where things are going. Unfortunately, I'm not going to give credit to. I have to give credit because I realise I'm on the camp things. So Diego, even back in 2019, created up with the idea of Turing bots. Obviously, it was a nod to Alan Turing with the idea of what's the future look like. The future looks like, the SDLC sits around here, and you've got design, you've got maybe UX people over here, you've got the coding dev over here, you've got testing, we've got ops over here, and each one of them has a Turing bot. Now, why a Turing bot? Well, first of all, and this is kind of in a way we've been working on the same concept, we just haven't called it that, is these are autonomous AI agents. Now, an AI agent isn't a bot, right? An AI agent is in essence a lot more programmable logic that exists within an agent that allows it to, in essence, communicate with other agents. So when we said that number at the start, which said 35% of all activities are going to be reduced by 2025, and we then went back to the current position, which is 20% productivity gain in 2024, which is where we are today, 2025. And you'll see this in my slides on Friday, is that at the moment, these Turing bots are specific to SDLC components, i.e., we would create one that would do testing, would create automated tests, would suggest test design methods, etc., etc. But really, this test design should be speaking to the security one, which then said, oh, I found a vulnerability or transposing through as that test. Could you now fix it and resolve that security issue? And then the security Turing bot would then pick that up as an activity and assisted with its human overlords, I use the word overlords in the nicest possible way, they would then fix and resolve the problem. And then the productivity increase would be, instead of isolated, we're learning how to do prompting and testing, they're learning how to do prompting and security, and never shall the two meet. Now the communication goes between. Now you would probably expect at this point, what's the goal? The goal is in essence a compressed SDLC where the roles blur. Now what was interesting by that is that if you've got agents and you can talk to an agent, then in theory you can navigate roles which you didn't have before, like usability, accessibility, security, operations, resilience testing, which we talked about in some depth last night. You can be part of all of this SDLC instead of being a tester or a developer or something. The roles will change, they will widen, your footsteps will widen, and part of these teams will be working and assisted with AI in the loop instead of human in the loop. This is AI in the loop. But that was definitely the long version of that answer for a very short question.
I built a demonstration bot to work with Slack, where the general goal was that the bot listens to all the Slack conversations, and if you want to engage with the bot, you call it by name, and if you read the text and did something. And in fact, I wanted to use it as a demonstration of how you could have a conversation with a bot listening in, driving the DevOps processes, the continuous delivery kind of processes. And that was okay. That was a bit of theory. There was no AI involved, whatever. And this sounds similar in that you've got individuals who something comes into their intro, an email or a WhatsApp message, or something happens to them, and they need to distribute some knowledge to certain people to unblock a deadlock or something like that. Now, the bot that listens to that, you give it a process and it'll do it. But on 99% of occasions, it's not on the process, it's unique. But if you have the bot records the pathways it's used to communicate with people, and then the people who are involved say, yeah, that's a good idea, that's right, it's got an example it can put in its model and learn from it and use it in the future. And I think that is how a bot can be actually trained, but it's unique to your situation in your software development teams or your customer support teams or whatever. I think those are going to be developing a lot faster soon.
Yeah. And I think, I know we're at a break again for 25 minutes. Partly why we wanted to answer these kind of questions is, when I said at the start, there was a hypothesis around the fact that prompt engineering wasn't going to be the future, so why are we all sat here and not down the pub, right? Whereas, well, no, talking to an AI isn't going to change. There is going to be part of the activity of you being involved as a human, you bringing your wisdom, your knowledge, your intelligence to be able to solve what I call cognitive reckoning. The cognitive reckoning capability is going to be all you. The difference is you're not going to have to exist in this ecosystem because everyone else is going to be running with systems at 35% productivity. Stuff's going to be going through the gap, and you're going to unfortunately have to be the AI's overlord to kind of point it in the right direction and say, I don't want any more negative tests on there, right? We've done every credit card permutation ever. Why are we testing WorldPay's or PayPal's system when we should be focusing on what's just come through, which is an incident from production around, we keep on, every morning we keep on having this issue. We need to find out the root cause of that. You, as the human, will be making the decisions, you'll be coordinating, you'll be speaking to cross-functional teams and their potential AI systems.
But the AI could be seeing all the data that no one human could take in.
Exactly, it's too complicated.
And just say, look, there's some patterns that are emerging. One is we're running out of time before we go live. So we're running out of time to make a decision. The data we've got is adequate in some areas, stop getting more, we're okay there. But we've got a whole backlog of bugs. Is someone going to pick up the notion of doing workarounds? For example, workarounds, known bugs where you can live with them in production, but have a process for dealing with them, it's really undersold. It's hardly mentioned in my experience. And yet, large organizations live with workarounds all the damn time, for years sometimes. But the AI could pick that up and look for those patterns and say, you, and you need to figure out a workaround to deal with this done and quick, because you've got 7 days in order to
Time sensitive, time, quality, cost. It's back to the normal 3 things. But when we started this conversation was being an AI whisperer. Now you're an AI wrangler, because you've got to be able to deal with, well, this ops bot's telling me, there's an issue, we need to investigate.
So again, off the top of my head, sorry, I'm just thinking of this. Just always
You
interested to
think
talk to
more
Johnny. So we have these weekly chats.
Every
sorry if
Friday for about an hour.
It's a bit kind of
Sporadic.
colloquial, yeah, sporadic, random. My guess is there's a model to be built here, where the use of AI might be, I ask it a question to do some research. What is the capital of Peru? Lima. Okay. What was the recent economic history of Peru in the 20th century, let's say? It was the economy of this, that, and the other. And then you get some bullets. Oh, write me a white paper, not a white paper, an article on the history of Peru in the last 100 years. And it'll do that. Now, that's not all research, it's generating stuff as well. But I think that's the simplest thing you can do. Just ask it questions and just say, do this, do that. And the next level is kind of coaching, where you get it to ask you questions so you can get your head around the problem that the AI isn't going to solve. I think there's another layer, which is like it acts as a messenger, where it takes the context of information it's got, not its training models, but your data in a kind of a RAG setup, and allows you or assists you in making decisions, or saying, you need to decide this by tomorrow 1 p.m. because, and stuff like that. So I don't know if it's a layer, or it's an onion, or a shape, or a 4-quadrant. We've all got 4-quadrant models. I think we're headed towards a better. It's like market sectors where AI has value, and where the complications are, but also potentially where the risks are. So I feel a model coming on.
You always feel a model coming on. That's because tomorrow is the keynote is going to be about your model for testing. So we're going to be back here at 5:02. If you want to take a break, get some more coffee, and we'll see you back in 20 minutes, everybody, for more ramblings of madmen. Could be it. Just
If I have the model, right? I'm working with it each day. I'm asking something practically, what's time ranges? Would that make sense at all? When it will become some way better?
Well, this is the thing. So the estimates that everyone's saying is by the end of next year, the models will have evolved so far that you won't see them.
I misunderstood. I mean, you said that we can fine tune ourselves. We have the model, but we fine tuning it like coaching on the day. Yeah. Which way you have now, let's say in local and live.
They're going in 2 directions. One is they gather more data and become more correct. So ChatGPT-4 was, when it arrived,
ChatGPT-5 is not going to be any better.
The data was 18 months old. Mm-hmm. So it didn't know about recent events.
So my questions, are they fine-tuning that model?
No, they're redoing it. They're rebuilding the whole thing. So the whole point with ChatGPT-5 is it won't incrementally be as an improvement from 3 to 4. 3 to 4 was a giant leap. 4 to 5 is a very small incremental improvement, but it's going to be focused more around this next generation of LAM kind of capabilities and vision models. Because like I said, it wasn't looking at images on websites before. Now it's looking at websites and images and bringing diagrams and everything else into it. So it's going to be incrementally more smart because it's read papers on, Stephen Hawking's and all the diagrams, all the equations, and now understands it. Yeah, it'll be a 2.
But there's also add-ons.
But for the average person, it won't be that much better. But this is what we're saying is that it will pivot, because before all you got was some text output. Now it'll just be a link where it'll say, do you want me to launch LLM Studio and launch the task you want? Do you want me to put it into your pipeline? Do you want me to, show you this in a visual manner? It'll all be interactive, and people will be like, oh my God. For us, we'll all be like, well, it's just sort of test automation. But the problem is they're not thinking about testing. They're thinking about replacing people. We're thinking, well, actually, this has got great opportunity for testing the systems, because we can say to it, give me the data, go and run it, execute it, come back and give it me in this format, in this particular way. And then our jobs are going to be 10x. And then what's interesting about it is Jason said, they've already said the productivity gain from Copilot for code generation is the developers are 15% more productive. So 15% more code's coming out. But they're saying it's 300, the code quality's dropped by 300%, which means that the more that they use code generation tools, the worse software is going to be, which then puts the pressure on testing. But then with the testing capabilities improving, there's still the same amount of, proportionally, the same amount of manual testing and everything else will still happen. They won't be replaced by AI. It will be people using more and more AI tools going, I just want another tool. I want another tool. I want a tool for this. And you're like, literally, I want a better data tool. I want a better modeling tool. I want a better execution engine. And everyone will just abstract it to the point of, well, I'll just swap it out with something better when it comes out in 3 months' time.
Well, what's happened in the releases the last 2 or 3 years is the models have got bigger, and you could say hopefully more today, but then when they build the model, that's it, it's fixed in time. For some period in the past, it's been like 18 months to 2 years. But it's still going to be a delay before you get another revision. But what they've also done is they said we're getting a lot of heat because we can't reference the internet. So they brought out a version which allowed you to look up things.
There's GPT search, which is a by day version.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not very good. The whole code generation, they've put a lot of effort in that. Microsoft obviously have put in a lot of effort in that.
Yeah.
And so on. So you're getting these add-ons, and also they're beginning to sort of look at specialisms. But I think what will happen is OpenAI will have this this massive thing, and that's their game, that's their business. Other people will build specialist models, so it could be a financial services model, a banking model.
Yeah, I think this is where it's going.
A testing model, maybe. But they'll be spin-offs, and so you'll use GPT for its language capability, but your local another model. And I don't see why you can't use multiple models.
You have to use multiple models, but that's why they wanted NPUs. Is they've already got a Copilot for security, which is a fine-tuned version of Copilot just for security engineers. And so we're going to see this in our industries. When people start playing nicely together, there'll be more testing, Copilot for testing, Copilot for business insurance, and people will opt into it. And then the whole point with the phone is that they will also exist there. So obviously Google.
They have a local copy and just work completely independent.
So you might just think,
I think there's going to be more of that.
Yeah. What am I looking at? Yeah.
But it's a guess. We don't know.
I don't know. Oh, obviously I know. You don't know.
It's all speculation.
I have a question.
Okay.
To you.
Okay.
Sorry, you will need to repeat an answer.
No, that's fine.
I didn't catch what DTI was.
So I'll at the end I'm going to give you a copy of my book. Which
it's your book.
It's my book, yeah. So we did last year we did a book on artificial intelligence software testing, how to test with AI. And then we decided to give the whole book away for free. So at the end I'll just link to
Oh,
it.
that's great.
But also if you wanted a physical copy, I'll send you a copy.
It's a really
Yeah, I want a real
copy. Something like that. But
yeah,
part of it in the back there, my section's all around this game of technology, which then kind of gives you a blueprint of how do I check that I've got the right type of data, the accuracy at the level A, so the accuracy is like, okay, how do I put in the checks to make sure that it's okay? It's literally just a guide that allows you, if you've got a team that's going to build AI into the product, what do you need to do as a tester to think about testing the AI system? Because of course that's really hard. It's like,
Because I tried to find your book and I didn't find it, and I thought that I don't understand you.
but I'll share it at the end. Like I said, I'll send some copies.
Thank you.
It's a bit like saying, what do you get in AI? I mean, this is crude, but it's like, it's an idiot savant. So it's like, let's say it's a person.
You're so mean to AI.
They really
It's going to come and get you.
much about anything. But their knowledge, how you ask them a question, yeah. And they're able, if you ask them a very structured question, they can give you an answer and give you a process. Because they say, well, I read it, I pieced together 3 things to the process. You can do that. And that's the kind of, I think, the lowest level research. Asking a question. When you want it to optimize my testing.
To give it a requirement and get this case.
I can sell you that.
Well, I think it's fine. I don't know if we're going to do any more slides or anything like that. Or...
No, we will do, yeah.
Okay,
I'm going to do the top 10 test prompts.
my directory, all my stuff, and it's all under Jonathan's SharePoint directory now. There's a thing called defo spam, which is a technique for evaluating user stories, but you could do it in regular requirements as well. And it basically talks about how do you validate a requirement. And one, the first D is for definitions. And do I understand all the words that could be used? Of course, returns, fantastic.
Redundant, ambiguous, and
Exactly.
mean many other things in many other
Yeah,
requirements.
so there's D, DE, FO, SBA, and they're all separate. Now I think, and this is what I don't want to be looking at in detail, I've only dug this up a week or two ago. I thought, no, I can use it. But it's 12 years old, so I haven't looked at it.
Okay.
But I think there's an AI process for each of those. Identify all the terms that need definition in this text. There we are, fine. Which ones are in the dictionary? Well, some aren't.
Which one from this studio you are using, because there are 20 of them on the
Yeah, the one I'm using at the moment, it's the Minstrel Instruct V2. Oh no, that's cursor. So this is the one I use. This is the one that I always use, which is the Minstrel 7B Instruct. That was, to me, that's the best one. But you know, and so if you go into the start, you can pick it. If you just type in
best for you for what?
anything English based, anything language based. If you go into like your, this is good for code, stable code Instruct 3B. And then the Minstrel 7B Instruct V2 is the best for language. So these are the two ones that I use: code generation and language generation, language understanding.
Not code itself and code generation, but the language itself.
So that one's code generation. Stable code Instruct is the code generation tool that model I use. And then when I'm doing language, I use Minstrel 7B as the base model. But obviously, that's because it runs in the 8 gig space. You can get variants up to 128 on the Minstrel one if you want to use the full one. And that's a 8 times 7B. So there's 8 separate models. That's just one of the 8 models. So that's the one I use because it's just so generic. It's the best performing one out of those ones.
I think AI could help in that.
Yeah, it's on the list. I'd like to see I'm running it now here, and I'm only using 3.85 gig. That's literally nothing on the laptop.
Yeah. But I've seen you use Snapdragon.
Yes, that's the Snapdragon Pro XL, right? So that's it's a bit of a beast in its own notation, but then next to it, this has got an NPU on it. It's
I
Intel.
can improve that
Intel
to be clear. Well, the developer wanted to write it this way, but I can
embedded
convert
one.
it to the AI.
It's no way as
Yeah,
close
it
as the
doesn't
ARM
know,
technology, but the problem with the
like,
ARM is
doesn't
it's
know
so
that
you know, some of it's emulating some of the x64 processing stuff, so there's not fully like PyTest and it doesn't have all the Intel optimizations for that, and it doesn't natively run the Snapdragon stuff, so there is a few problems. But I'm running the ARM. This is the ARM version of the Studio anyway. So yeah. But obviously you can run it on Intel or whatever else it is. But yeah,
Probably this Snapdragon.
it is. Yeah, it is a monster, but it's also quite expensive.
Yeah, I read about it.
Yeah, so
I'm not sure if you can buy it in Europe.
no, I don't think you can at the moment. I got it from Microsoft Shopper, Microsoft HQ. Yeah, Microsoft HQ. I was at the Microsoft shop in Microsoft Campus when I bought it. I was like, I'm going to grab it before it sells out, kind of thing. But Paul's like, he's got a 1490 which he uses at home, you know, so that's his base rate. But that's only because it's
Another
24 gig
good idea
memory on it,
for
whereas
shifting left.
I've been using the M3, and it's just dog shit. It's absolute dog shit. It's just, even with unified memory, it just doesn't work as well as this does. Look at the size of this tiny. It does, but that's ingest. So if you go to the LangChain, the ingest process takes 3 or 4 minutes anyway, even if it's a small file. So that's not really the language model being touched. That's just lang chain doing the ingest functions. And then once it's fed it into it, it's super fast. You can see now it's 3.85 meg, and then the rest is all being offloaded to the LLM. So it's literally like super. It should be super fast. Now when I do responses, but yeah, that's super slow. 2.77 tokens is like super slow. But still better than the GPU which you get on these devices. They're just not valuable at all. And then if you put it into CPU, it just takes too long. But at the end, I'll show the list of the ones that I use. I like to use 22 of them, 22 models at the moment, and they're all available at plug-in spec. So I run it, and we run it in a single model, but it's in an IM bag, so the containers just marks it. It's about 140 gig of space, just models on there. And then we run 2 models simultaneously, so we'll have load 2 models into things, which is 12.4 gig. We've got 2 models side by side, so that'll be the Instruct 3B and the Minstrel 7B by default. And then we'll swap models out. So if you detect Gherkin, it'll load the 1.6 Gherkin model in, and then it'll load the Minstrel as the end goal, which is it's a language to Gherkin. So we do it. We does it in essence at runtime using the large language model router, and the router picks which model it should load into memory and what should be the target transformation model, which it then passes it to. So in essence, does the transform and then passes it to the other model and says, "Is this correct?" And then it comes back and says, "I'll regenerate some code through stable code, or I'll regenerate some." Or use a different model like Codex T5 if I'm not getting, the right type of output coming into the right format. Yeah, but you should be able to swap them out, and that's the whole point of having the ML flow. Is if you've got the ML flow, you can swap the models out, then rerun the same workload that you had before, and then the fluid toxicity and the fluidity score should be something similar. If they're massively low, then you've got a problem that you've either over-optimized, tuned your prompts to be so good just to run on these one models, or you've got a problem that, you need a big enough sample size to of stuff you want to run through it.
So I would like to verify this for local performance.
Yeah, so I use a Taurus optimized version for JMeter. So I can put the JMeter log into it. So I put the login and ask it to create the test results. But it's so when you set up a standard JMeter, if you're lazy to create a standard JMeter scenario, you've got the time series data that just dumps into a file. I'll pass the time series data instead of passing it to InfluxDB, which is where I usually store it. I then dump it straight in, which I usually use the tick stack to do all that. I dump all that raw information in, and it takes a long time to load it in. But once you've got it in, you've got small models. So I have a JMeter model we've got, it's the Taurus model we've got. Literally, you load in, let's say 2 gig of log files, and then you say, visualize it, shows all the outliners, and it will pick everything up.
And I have to test because I never
never
heard about such an approach.
Yeah, but I used to be part of with Alon, who was the guy who wrote JMeter, but then created BlazeMeter, and then BlazeMeter created Taurus. Taurus was the open source library that in essence powered JMeter. So I used Taurus for everything, and then now the XAML which you're writing within your Taurus, I put all the Taurus documentation into my flat files. So I then say to it, pass the Selenium file and turn it into a JMeter script. And then it just does it, and then I make sure it's valid. And then I also make sure, like I said, good practices, that it's got the right threads and all the profile that I want it to ramp up at, based on the volumetrics and all that I've generated, and it populates it all up. And I run blends of Selenium scripts plus, it's awesome, honestly. It's so nice. But like I said, you need the right model for the right time, because otherwise you just can't do it.
You did that stuff before.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. But yeah, I'm happy to share the models that we use because they save so much time. We are eventually going to do more fine-tuned models, but we haven't done that. It takes too long. Costs too much money. Not the bong again. I didn't even get my coffee.
We're still on questions. If you want to do anything?
No, I'm straight into the other slides now, I think.
Go.
I'm going to need your brain input for most of this other stuff.
You've got some nibbles here if you want something.
Thanks.
It'll probably best not to put one in your mouth and then speak.
Thanks for the advice. Oh, poor old Carl. It's my Titanic thing.
You've got a few minutes if you need it.
You want to come up front? I want to take a photo. If you come up front.
Why?
Otherwise, people won't think we turned up. Some of us got to get paid. Smile, everybody. It's about look happy, like you've had a really good time. I know it's a hallucination, but we'll do it. Can't be that.
We should have asked them to do it. Up to the
So there were some really good questions at the start about during the break around not falling over was the one that you had. So has anyone used Kaggle before? Kaggle? Anybody? My writing is horrible. Kaggle. So Kaggle is Google's machine learning crowd platform. If you're learning to do machine learning, not prompt engineering, then it's a great place to start. Now, why am I telling you this? 2 minutes before we get to this new one, is you find that you're in the hands of Jupyter notebooks quite a bit when you start doing these prompts, under the hood a little bit. You're a big Jupyter notebook person, aren't you? Yeah? Maybe?
It is. Kaggle is Jupyter notebooks, but with data, access to data.
Yeah. But also writing the prompts. If you want to write the prompts underneath the hood, right? Now, what's interesting about Kaggle is, as demonstrated by Carl here, is the demo project's actually about the Titanic. So I don't know if anyone's tried it, but the demo project, when you sign up to Kaggle, they give you the data set, and they give you all the machine learning models, and then they let you run through in essence, the tutorial, right? Which is really useful. Now, I'm only saying this because I think it's just been the anniversary of the Titanic movie, not the actual ship, which is useful. And what's interesting about doing the project, so I'm going to spoil it for everyone, just so they want to do it in the first place, is they actually, from the data you uncover, that actually it wasn't anything to do with women or children or rich or poor. It was whoever was closest to the lifeguard area. So as you start looking at the data, you realize actually it was a free-for-all. It wasn't a Hollywood movie where Jack, unfortunately, gives up his place for, I forget the name of the lady, but Rose. There we go. So part of it is, I would recommend checking out Kaggle if you're wanting to get your basic ML stuff down. But as I've got Paul, instead of the lovely Carl, I thought, well, what we'll do is we'll just talk about some prompts, right? Because, I think partly, what we've talked about a little bit today, and I won't take full credit for any of these, but part of it is, I know someone came up and said, oh, well, I just wanted to, I want to create a good test on requirements. And, we've literally spent the last 2 years trying to get to this point. And what we're trying to say is that even though it feels like it's quite easy to iterate on a bad prompt to say, create test data for a login form, we've already got into that point where there is that mission statement where we're saying, okay, what we want to do is we want the test data to be in a particular CSV format. I want 10 sets of that. I want valid and invalid usernames, blank fields, special characters, all sorts of other stuff, right? There's a couple of these where you kind of look at them and go, some of this is really good practice, some of this is kind of just very basic, right? So we just talked about the example where you said, well, actually, I want you to create me a gherkin, but here's an example of a good gherkin script. Part of it is sometimes you've got to actually give it the underlying structure which you'd like it to write into. And at the end, I will show you kind of our what we've been working on for the last 2 years and how difficult it is to go from something like requirements into tests. And when I say tests, I don't mean it's writing the perfect test. I mean it's helping assist the test design process, right? I think all we've probably learned from today's session is that actually using these kind of tools are incredibly complex, and there's no silver bullet. There's no kind of, okay, if I write it in a particular way, it's going to give me the right responses. And I think hopefully you've probably taken away a few things, like it's all dependent on really getting the data into the right format for things like RAG, but also that the future is really going to be understanding the structure of that document and your system to be able to create models. And I know you're going to probably talk a little bit about models later on. But we've also kind of we've talked about some of the kind of important things around ambiguity of tests, right? Ambiguity of requirements. Your example was around, well, ask me what better requirements I should have written, and it comes back with, well, you should do it agile, right? It's kind of, it doesn't feel like it's even trying at this point. It's kind of, it's not valuable. We gave that great example of saying, well, and I heard someone say, I don't know who it was, but they said risk-based testing, right? Well, which test should I run first? When Jason did this originally, he created this bit.ly link, which I kind of, getting old. I feel as old as you now. I don't know how that happened. Is that what it was? bit.ly. That's one word for now, but I think it was called, because it was this time last year, PNSQC. I know, that's just literally redirected to that. So bit.ly, let's see if it was Starbucks. Oh, I'm just going to go to my bit.ly account and find out what it was. This is where you see all my really embarrassing redirection links, which is now going to come along. That one's today. Anybody wants to watch my quantum talk, it's bit.ly quantum testing. That's the one that will I'll take to my grave with me. Retest, generative AI, test code scouts. That's the EU actually. I don't care about that. New model to buy for testing. There you go. And for you. Can large language models give you superpowers? No, it can't. Right, so here we go. Eventually find the link. Oh no, is that? Oh no, that's literally going into a Slido book. Here we go. Eventually. So Paul did. Giving Paul no credit because he didn't deserve it for this one. Is that so? When Jason started creating good prompts, I said to him, "Oh, could you?" This time last year, I was at Portland event, which was a couple of weeks ago, which I was at, and part of it is, I said to him, "Could you go and test the website using your prompts?" And he said, "Yeah, no problems. I'll go and have a look." And so he created. I'll just quickly scroll down there to see. This is automatic. This is what he had in his prompt bag, right? Is he created. Well, the list just carries going on and on. Anyway, we don't really care, but there's so many of them. And so part of it is he created these prompts and, one of them was here, verify readability of privacy policy variant. That sounds really boring, actually. Let's try and find one that's a bit more exciting than okay. Verify insecure direct objects of valid objects for IDOR attacks. And so what he ended up doing was, in essence, he created a prompt. And then, like we said before, he then created a justification. Well, why is it so important that you do this test, right? Then also he said, well, why is it interesting? Why is it interesting to test that particular scenario? And then what he created, in essence, was some very basic gherkin that could be a structure, again, like we showed earlier, to be able to formalize a very simple test to actually run. And within each one of these, in essence, 300, 400 tests, he then gave it a prioritization and the importance score. So in this case, this susceptible to IDOR attacks he reckoned, was a low, right? And a priority of 55. Now, interestingly, what he would do is he'd ask it to create a test, it would verify direct object reference. And he'd then ask it again, give me a priority at 1 to 100 of how important it is. And it would give him 55. So everything he generated out of the 200, 300, 400 tests were automatically generated by ChatGPT and then actually generated the test scripts, as in the automation scripts, run that against the PNSQA website. And then when I did this live on stage at Star West a couple of weeks ago, he'd gone through and actually showed all the vulnerabilities within the Star West website, all the issues that he found, again, running the actual automation that kind of did it before. This was all just, in essence, a stack of prompts to say, go through, find the state transition diagram and then say, well, what state should I have? What parts of the system should I be testing? Then once it's found part of the search interface, it then says, well, what searches should I be? Should I do negative one? Should I have auto suggesting one? Should I have a basic input one? So part of it is for each one of these, and I'll share the link. Well, you've already seen it, so no point of sharing it again, but I will share it. You could create, in essence, for your app, a whole stack of these kind of automatically generated tests. Now, are these good tests? Now, if I send that to Paul would say, well, it depends, because, but I would say, okay, they're tests, right? And the way he demonstrated it, he said, because he did the testing for Google search when he was doing how Google tests. And what he did is he took the 1,000 tests that his prompts had generated and the 1,000 tests that his internal Google testers generated, and then he put them next to each other. Now, does anyone have a guess of how much overlap there was? Yeah, about 0. There was a very small amount, and the quality of the the Google testers' tests were no better or worse than the ChatGPT ones. And so, in a way, he was like, they're a completely different subset. And this is the whole point. We're saying that actually maybe AI versus human are going to be very different sets. Are they valid? Potentially, right? There's some value in them. How valuable they are, we don't really know. Some of this seems really sensible. Some of this seems fairly boring and not interesting. But this gives you it inspires you enough to say, well, actually, if you can do that with a few prompts, and generate that very quickly, then actually there is some value in being able to do some of the prompt engineering stuff. So being able to understand, well, which test should I run based on a proprietary risk indication that it allocated itself probably isn't the best way of doing it. There's a much better ways of doing it. Not to shame anybody, but I saw an RBT sticker as I walked past. So, there is formalized better ways to do risk-based testing and prioritization. The same as what we just talked about for finding a bug. Part of it is having a mitigation action, actually having the code that might relieve it, the justification why it's important. All that is very useful. Maybe it's not useful in the long term because it's a lot of noise. Maybe writing bug reports or defect lifecycle management stuff isn't about tools or AI just going off and doing it. Maybe it's still very human based, right? The same goes for writing automation scripts. The question earlier on about, well, what should I be doing to, how are those automation scripts in my my automation framework? Well, you probably want to give it examples of how you currently do it, and then say, okay, this is what good looks like. Generate them in this style. The same thing we just talked about over the lunch break session was around what large language models are really good at doing is around summarizing large amounts of information. And so we just talked about JMeter logs in the sense of you can pass JMeter logs in, hundreds of megs worth of time series data, and you can say to it, tell me what's interesting about that data. And it will look through it and summarize what it finds interesting. The same as test results. We said earlier about the fact that, is it interesting about that it executes slightly slower? Is it that this part of the system, which it's identified, seems to, be not as robust as every other part? It seems to fail a lot more. We don't know. Part of it is this historical information that we could potentially leverage on past test results that we can bring to life. Again, I think are a very useful use case for prompting. The next thing, which is a couple of quick examples, I think we again covered them today, which is why I just wanted to replay them over, was we talked about Markdown and, massive credit where credit's due. There was a great example from one of the attendees around, let's go back to the Miro board. That's on nice. Take a picture from mine. No, I can find my way around. It's like a little bug hunting session.
Green one.
Yeah. Green means good, right? Green means past. It's like a cognitive problem, right? The news has just hit your phone. I don't know what that news is. So this is a great template from your prompts, and this is a prompt that has been refined over time, right? And again, it has that same structure. It has the objective. It has that markdown saying, I want you to do this. I want you to generate some test case for me. And I'm going to give you it in markdown format with all the information that you need. Now go off and I want you to test these main features. So in a way, you'd already kind of done what you tried to do before. Tell me what are the main features, right? Tell me what are really important. And then underneath that, talked a bit about the different types of tests that want to be run, functional, non-functional. What do you want to do? And what we'd got in essence, in our script when we were running ours is we kind of had, in essence, a general template, in essence, and then we had specific versions for usability, performance, security, variants that would go off, which would be a little bit more laser focused. The same thing with, well, what structure do I need, right? If you're using, in this case, ALM or Jura or something, you're wanting a structure where there's a test title, there's a test script, a step, there's some preconditions, there's some expected results, there's some actual results, right? So we did this about a year and a half ago, and it kept on throwing out an error because some of them didn't have actual results. And you kind of say, well, should everything have an actual result? You know, should I, click the mouse and mouse is clicked?
The answer is yes, if you call it a test. If it's not a test or a check, you're going to use that word.
Okay. If I'm not checking, do I need an actual result?
No, in order to check, you need a result, an expected result, I would say, because then you don't know what to do with the information you just discovered. So if you have a, let's call it a test without a result, you're still exploring.
Okay.
So that's my definition of exploring testing, is about trying things out without worrying what the outcome is, just to learn what it does. And then when you say, right, I'm going to figure out whether this is working correctly, then you make predictions and then you operate that way.
Yeah. And so
I think that's a better explanation of exploratory testing than the bark and bolts version.
we're going to get in trouble eventually for this.
Not at all. I have it on good authority that they saw my the new model thing and they said, oh, they liked it. Oh, so they're in denial about their own explanation. Yeah, right, okay, I'm happy with that.
I'm not going to get there just in case I get blacklisted again from those guys. So, what we did, which was a mistake in my prompt tuning capabilities, and I went back and raised this as an issue with our system. I say, if there is no actual expected result, go and push it back through another cycle to tell it must create a expected result. And actually, the quality of my test started deteriorating because we were forcing it to create an expected result when really the description wasn't enough to be able to say the step, which is, I don't know, clicking the tick box is being checked. That wasn't actually that exciting. So, I think part of it is you can sometimes overanalyze the way that you're expecting the structure of the test to come back. Equally, here, which is again a nice structure, is you kind of say, these are the steps that I expect to go through the system. Now, you might argue, oh, well, should enter valid email be one step and then enter valid password be another? It all depends on the level of abstraction that you're looking at the system on the test or the application on the test, right? Equally, if you're trying to understand priority like we saw on Jason's spreadsheet, it's like priority might be high, medium, low here, but you might define it 1 to 5 or a different level at a different area. Equally, there's some notes here to say, well, actually, do some edge cases. Now, interestingly, again, Chetty calls them edgy tests. Now, I didn't know there was such thing as edgy tests. So if you go into ChatGPT and say, create more edgy tests, it will create you more bizarre things. Now, the only bug that he found in all the Google search stuff that was actually a real bug was when you go into the paid subscription, you're wanting to buy ad space on Google. If you go into it and you triple click on a button, for some reason, the button JavaScript program properties that have been given, single click, send a message, double click, whatever, triple click, just cancels out the original first click, so it doesn't actually send it. And you might say, well, that's the valid response. I should be able to either single click or double click, but I know you with your dirty fingers, you'd have been like, double, triple click, right? But I would never have asked, I'd never created a test that said click 3 times. Equally, it would only be an automation script that would be able to do that so quickly.
So,
is that a valid test?
It's a valid test, but is it a valid interpretation in that? Do Google already know about it? Probably.
No, they didn't know about it. They spoke to them. afterwards.
Well, yeah, do they think it's a bug?
They said it was.
I
It
just
should have,
keep it-
something should have happened.
But yeah, but who cares about that one? No, I mean, if you keep it 3 times, nothing happens. You think I do that all the damn time. You know.
My dad only triple clicks on things. I don't think he knows the concept of single clicking on anything. Right? So,
well, I'd have to be convinced of that one, I have to say.
but it's interesting because things like the European Accessibility Act, which comes into play, are actually talking about haptic responses, i.e., it expects you to get feedback from the actual response, the touch, the interaction should give you a haptic response if you have certain conditions. So part of it is now it's no longer just a button click response, it's a haptic response back.
Mm.
So we talked a little bit about Markdown, credit for Markdown there. You know, we talked a little bit about requirements traceability, talked about the multiple complexity, about the fact that if something changes, there's an impact analysis that then changes to documents. And we're also saying that if you put document set version 1, which has version 111 of all the documents, and then you ask for a prompt against version 1 set, that actually it's not going to be as good as if it's got version 1, v2, v3, 1, 1, because there's more sets of data, therefore it's got more tokens, it's got more sources of knowledge, got more sources of information, so the quality of the output might be improved, even if it hasn't changed the underlying text. Is that, you know, you're frowning like you're
I'm trying to understand it. I'm not sure what you're saying.
We're saying that the document set, even though if we normally said, okay, there's a new requirement come out, right? The new requirement is Paul's going to have 2 beers tonight.
So, old requirement, new requirement.
Yeah.
Appended or inserted.
Yeah, so first requirement is you go to pub tonight, get 1 beer, right? And then we all realise that's not going to happen. So version 2 says Paul is going to have 2 beers. However, if then in the sources of information over here, there's some logic that's been added in that's saying you can't double fist having 2 beers because it's bad etiquette, then your test case might be referring to this component over here, which has changed, even though it's not directly related to the, may or may not be directly related. Might say something like, you're not allowed to have 2 or more drinks at your table at a time.
Well, that applies to any change.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, okay, so
we're saying that the actual RAG data sets increase in size, therefore, should you have to relaunch all your, rerun all your prompts?
You should rerun all your ingestation. Is that a word?
It is ingestation. It's going to be when we're eating something later, that will be the word, right?
So at which point, I would want the AI to say this test is either A, redundant, B, inadequate, or C, just wrong. The numbers change. The check should be 2, not 1, or whatever.
Okay. So I feel like this
Or
is
something like that.
I feel like this is a defo spam opportunity. I want you to get up and do something. Come on, get up.
Okay, well, if you can be my assistant.
I will be.
Yeah. We're taking a pause in that.
Well, no, it's pause. It's a misdirection over to your stuff, which is definitely the way forward.
If you open the document, and I can just walk through it very quickly.
Which bit? Give me a number. Don't say
A number. No, in your
oh, you don't have
PowerPoint.
defo spam in here.
No, it's not.
You do,
It's
it's
not.
there.
I don't have time. No, it's mentioned, but it's not there. No.
Okay, I'm doing it. You're like a bickering old couple.
I'm 20 years older than him, and I should give him a clip, shouldn't I? And this is a clip. Yeah, I like it.
Okay. Workshop materials
One of them
is
Yeah,
Paul
mine.
Gerald's material. Defo spam.
Right, thank you so much. So in I think I feel like there's example. And the lady who asked me about requirements change and stuff like that. I can't remember. I can't see where you are. Hello, you're over there. So I thought I should talk about it. I wanted to talk about it. I didn't have time to talk about it. But, you know, I had a bit of a brain storm this morning as well. If you want to scroll up a bit, one of the contributions that we make as testers has got to be what we do on the left. So hold shift left idea, you'll know that. Why does it work? Well, if we find faults in requirements, they are usually more expensive to fix later. So if we fix them early, much cheaper. Okay. That's not the real reason. The real reason, no one is interested in reviewing requirements documents. It's dead boring. But testers quite enjoy it sometimes. Because you're formulating ideas for testing, you're building a mental model, you challenge things as you read in your head. You think, that doesn't sound right, or that's incomplete, or that's ambiguous, or these two things conflict. You notice these things. We're very good at finding problems. It's a skill, it's an art, a craft. So, yeah, I don't need all that stuff. Oh, sorry, okay, so first thing to say, when you read a requirements document, it amazes me that you can read a requirements document and then you can talk about it to someone else in the business, in the company, and you say, well, what does this mean? And they say, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I don't know what that term means. Now that term might be let's say a customer order. That's a stupid example. Let's say it's customer. I don't know what a customer order is. Well, what do you mean you don't know that? Surely it's fundamental. Yeah, well, I haven't got time to learn all this time. They don't actually learn the language that is used in their business because, well, I don't work in the purchase order processing department. I mean, asset management. On a vague idea what a customer order is, but I don't know. Hold on, everyone's putting millions of dollars into this development, and some people don't even know what this fundamental thing actually means. So the first thing is do we understand the language we actually use? It's really simple, but if you put your hand up in a meeting and say, I don't know what customer order is, everyone's going to say, oh, you idiot. That's why no one puts their hand up, even the testers, because they don't want to be seen as idiots. Because you should know this. Day one thing. Yeah, I bet the CEO doesn't know what it is. And he's signing off the checks. You know? Anyway, so language, so that one word set has, I can't remember this, I wrote this 12 years ago. I think it's 110 different meanings, little slightly different meanings. I'm sure you have similar words in different meanings, words that have multiple meanings, and some of them are really important differences. Sir, a bit more scrolling. Right. I don't want to talk about that. Sorry. That's not relevant to what we're doing. So, that bit. So what I did, one day I thought, how would you review a business story, a Gherkin story? But it's the same, it's exactly the same for natural language requirements. So the sequence is, I don't know if you can make that bigger, because it's probably not readable at that. So that these words here, I need a pointer or something. Thank you. I'll be quick.
Oh, you don't have to be quick. Be impactful.
I can hold it still. So I thought, of all the words, underline all the words that need a definition. Are these words, these phrases, in my glossary of terms? Yes or no? Next one. What features do I see in this text? If it's a story, it's one feature, you've got your answer. But in natural language requirements, features it's a bit fuzzy, isn't it, sometimes? Next one, outcomes. What does this feature do? Okay, what does it actually do? What are the outcomes? What can it do? Okay, what scenarios exist? What situations is it designed? Will it be designed to deal with? The variations, the decisions that it makes. What are these scenarios? Okay, different situations. Next one, from the requirements document, can I predict what the outcome will be? Now, I guarantee, if you haven't already found problems, that's when you start hitting really real issues, because you say, it's meant to handle this, that, and the other, but it doesn't tell you what it should do. It's simply missing. It doesn't say what it should do. Now, you might be able to guess that, but the requirements might not give you that information. That's a gap in the requirements. Okay, so where are we now?
You're up my screen for a second.
Outcome scenarios. So prediction. So I want to be able to predict what the system should do. Surely the developers need to know that. I'm not being difficult. Oh, sorry. Ambiguity. Is it not clear how this should be? Is it A or B? It's not clear which way it should jump. Or two different terms are used for the same entity in the text. It's ambiguous. What are they getting at? Are there two different things, or are they one different thing with two names? I don't know. It's ambiguous. And the last one, missing. Is there anything missing from this? Are there outcomes? Are there scenarios I can think of? Is there a feature missing? I've got add, update, read. I haven't got delete. Is that important? Yes or no? I don't know. So, okay, so now when I wrote that down, I wrote it in that order and I thought, bloody hell, there's a process here. Oh, so if we scroll it, oh, sorry, sir. What this paper does, it says, how do you look at definitions? Okay, identify all the named entities that may have significance. Have I got a definition in my glossary? Yes or no? Should I define it? Probably. Next one. Keep going. Features. I'm talking about one story per feature, but the check is the feature defined? Okay. Next one. Outcomes. Now I've got one scenario per outcome. So for every outcome, it's the system shall do this. You should be able to think of at least one scenario that generates that outcome. But once you have more scenarios, every scenario should have an outcome. You know, given when then says this is what the system should do. Given the situation, when I do this, that should happen. And so on. Now you get the idea. So I'm trying to explain the process. I think that you could write a prompt to do all of those things. And so so essentially what you do is, I'm going to give you a requirement, some text, a fragment, not the whole thing maybe, but let's say a section. I'm going to give you that describes a feature. I want you to do the defo span thing and tell me everything you think that might be of interest. Is every term in this definition in the glossary? Yes or no? By the way, here's the glossary, so it can tell you that it's in the glossary. What's that? S is scenarios. P is can I predict. O is outcomes. You get the idea. I think that's a pretty mechanical process. Even AI could do. So I'm hoping that I'm going to have a go at this. I'm going to try and make it put a series of scripts. It might be several prompts, but and I don't use chat. I use code, so I can use code. So I'm tempted to write a little utility that says you throw some text in it and it'll tell you, can I identify features, outcomes, scenarios, and so on. I think that could be really useful. That's my theory. It doesn't exist yet, but if you do use that, if you read that document and think, oh, that's interesting, write some prompts against it.
And you can send some copies out.
Here.
You can send some free copies out. That's what we decided. We're just going to send out loads of free copies of books.
Free copies of what? The book?
Yeah, you want a little pocket book.
Yeah,
you don't have any production left for it.
The book is in the...
Yeah, no, that's a PDF version.
Yeah, okay. Okay. If you help me with Defostan, I'll send you a book.
Signed.
It's signed. Anything else?
Copies, that's what we want.
So I'll fly over and give it to you personally. Is that the idea?
Oh yeah, if you can do it. If you can build for it, then have to do it.
But anyway, isn't it weird? One thing leads to another, and you make connections. That's 12 years old. I'm not saying how proud I am. I'm not boasting. I'm just saying things that you come across in your life come back. Things go in cycles. You think, I can reuse that. And that's what I kind of thought that last night vaguely, and I thought, you know what, I'm definitely going to do that now. So there you go.
So
I'm shutting up.
interestingly, as much as I would want to endorse Paul's book without at least a 5% cut of it.
Well, that's free.
So ironically, this is what happened when we started on this journey. This is what happened to us, and this is me in India, unfortunately, talking about it. I realised that it's only better if you're actually on your own slide, right? But yeah, what we did when we first started understanding requirements is we actually created this terms list that derived out of the back of documents. So we ingest the documentation, and then and this wasn't just requirements. This was also everything from your Confluence and your SharePoint side. You know, this was your terms that exist in your application space. But of course, we also had all the ones that you guys now have, all the ISTQB, all those ones. So we ended up with this massive terms list, like a data dictionary, like you just mentioned, which had terms that were not, were not defined. And partly what we did is when we fed in these documents originally, we kind of threw out a list of, please define this term. Please explain to me where I can understand this term. And this was the first step with the humans, was the ingestion process to understand, well, I don't understand this. You need to define it for me. And I think, look, there was a question that you guys had originally around, well, okay, I'm feeding in my documents. How many documents do I refer to until eventually I have to give up, because a document can refer to another document, to another document, to another document. Of course, the more you feed into it, the higher level of accuracy that it's going to actually have, right? And so this was the foundational aspect behind how you process and ingest requirements. Now, we obviously went the other way, I'm not going to look to your face for the response here because I know what it's going to be. We also said, a lot of people we spoke to said, well, we've got lots of tests. We don't have many requirements. All the requirements are out of date, or, they've not been updated. And we said, okay, well, we could reverse engineer tests to then derive requirements.
But why bother if you've got tests? They're more accurate than requirements for other things.
Exactly, but that's the whole point, is if you're a business,
Yeah, they want a big document. Yeah.
Or they want to understand, based on a moment in time, what is the requirements to these systems, and you could derive that from tests. You're absolutely right.
I'm not sure they do that.
I know, that's why I didn't ask you, right? That's why I literally said, shut up. But part of it is we started with this idea, and then there was two things that we said we never did, which we did. The first one was this, which was adding a virtual assistant, Clippy, because, keeping up with the Kardashians, we had no choice. And the second one, which is a slightly evolved version of whatever version this is, which isn't on this person's phone either, is over here, there is domain-specific variants of models, i.e. automotive, aerospace and defense, autonomous vehicles, etc., etc. And that was slightly depressing because we didn't want that to be an extra source, because we didn't want the tail wagging the dog, right? Now, this was the workshop we ran in Sweden, actually. So then what we talked about, which doesn't seem to be on this now that I'm looking at it, what we've done on the last workshop was talking about, I was talking to the gentleman about it over the last break, was saying about having, in essence, a large language model router. The idea is at runtime, you've got to understand what type of information you want to process. And talked a lot about prompt chains and how the fact that, half of that might start off as Gherkin. It might start with a defo spam area where you say, okay, define me each one of these areas. That might be part of the prompt chain. But at some point, you might generate some Gherkin and then say, is this, has the axioms that I expect to see? Is it a valid Gherkin script, etc., etc.? There's different models that work in different ways. Anyway, that was not that exciting. That was definitely not that exciting as it hurts. Here we go. So this is the actual, the model I was talking about, is you typically will have some type of large language model router, which is in essence just like a router at home. It sits there and it says, I'm reading code, so I need a code-based model to actually read the code, and I'm reading Python. I'm reading given when then, I'm reading Gherkin, I want to run the Gherkin fine-tuned model. I'm reading tests, I want a test QA, perfect QA test person, but we don't have that. We don't have that yet, but we are going in that direction. And I also noticed somebody put on one of the questions around testing SAP, right, which I think was your love child, right? And here I've just noticed this in the smallest words ever, Salesforce here, right? So if for those in the audience who are keen automation engineers or budding automation engineers, 2-3 weeks ago, Salesforce launched XLAM. XLAM is the large action model for Salesforce. It's called XLAM. You can download it off GitHub now if you want to download it. And it's the first large action model that is usable by everyone. So in essence, it just destroys Selenium, because you can say to it, go in, order me a book. You don't have to say, go to Amazon, go to your favorite bookstore, whatever. It will just go off and work it all out. Okay. So XLAM is incredibly
powerful. Does it include a driver?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does the whole thing. So XLAM is the first one. We've been, unfortunately, because XLAM only came out 3 weeks ago, we've been building our system on OpenLAM. OpenLAM's an open source LAM, obviously, and it isn't the full-fledged, full-fat version which Microsoft have their hands on, which no one else is going to get their hands on anytime soon. but is all the PyAuto test stuff anyway. So XLAM, I would highly recommend checking out. And then I said I would share at the end some of our models that we use. Now, just to confuse it, this is in essence what an XLAM does. An XLAM has got the ability to understand, at the moment, 12 to 14% of all the applications that exist on the world. And when I say that, I mean everything that's not in a browser. So it already supports browsers natively, so it can do everything you could ever want in a browser, but it also now can do it on an application state as well. So this is why this technology is so incredibly powerful, is it's designed to be able to support any type of application. It's also designed to understand applications as it runs at runtime. Like I said, it's looking at what the screen is, it's trying to make decisions, it's trying to navigate through it, it's trying to learn documentation which you fed it internally. And to my previous point, you're feeding in information, input in essence, and you're going through a stack of transformations and translations, and they could be code to English, they could be English to code, it could be whatever else it is. But what's more important at the end is the ability for it to actually be able to see what's going on and then recognize it and then be able to drive it. So this is where I think the drawing that I did earlier around AI agents, or whatever they called it on here, Turing bots, this is where the industry's going, and it is quite exciting. The next thing I said is obviously the whole Babelfish landscape. Everyone know Babelfish? Anybody know about Babelfish? Anyone? Yeah. One person with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Well, in the official version, which would normally be there, unfortunately I'm there at the moment, is the Babelfish you put into your ear, and then what it does is it takes an input of a language and then it excretes out of this, whatever it is.
It's like Google Translate.
Like Google Translate. It excretes out of the back another output. And what we realized quite quickly is that we talked about language at the start, about the fact that it's good with Japanese and stuff like that, but we also realized that actually Python, it seems to be its bread and butter, because it's had so much training data from Python that Python seems to be the way it goes really nicely. Equally, if you're going from code to action, code to a model, we've done some of these activities today. We've done a test or a requirement, which is test the system, give me a state transition diagram, and it's created a model. We can take that model and we can ask it to generate some automation. We can actually take that code and generate some tests. We can take tests and turn those into actions with test data sets. This is just a translation process. Now, what's also interesting, which is on the right-hand side, is we don't generate, we're agnostic to language. So we now run markup, Gherkin, Python, and also other code, all within the same script. We just pass the information backwards and forwards, which is a common practice now. But I think part of it is you've got to become language agnostic. You don't need to, generate it in a particular type of proprietary format. I don't know what my final slides. Oh, here it is. So, like I said, I asked Jason to quickly go onto Automation Star, which was 2 weeks ago. And the first thing he found was a content security violation, which was when you put your credit card details in to buy the ticket for Automation Star, you could pull up information that you shouldn't be able to pull out, which seems like a bit of a worry, but at the same time, it kind of just shows you how these things work. But if you go to checky.ai, you can use this for free. And what, in essence, it does is it baselines, it looks at something like Automation Star, and it looks at all the other events, and it compares, runs, in essence, the same tests against Automation Star as Eurostar or Star West, Star East, even though they're owned by the same people. It will go through, and then it will create Sophia, who's a security engineer, who's looking for OWASP vulnerabilities. It looks for, Paul, the content producer, who's looking at brand compliance. It generates all of those personas that we gave on that spreadsheet, and then it comes back with outputs that actually can allow it to understand what could be something weird that you've not thought of before. I'm quite sure why this is not actually flicking through on my normal thing, but I'll let it go. Anyway, I said a couple of things. One was that I'm making the mistake next year of ending my career on a low by talking about quantum, which seems like the most painful thing in the entire world, which no one will turn up to those sessions, don't worry. And, actually, I had to do this, and I was running this session for the first time a few weeks back in London, and literally the woman who was writing on the board what I was talking about wrote nothing until I brought Schrödinger's cat up to allow her to at least have one thing to draw. So there's Schrödinger's cat somewhere over here. There we are. Oh, anyway, so that's what I'm unfortunately doing. But I also, the reason why I put this deck up anyway was I just wanted to share the code for the book, because a couple of people said, "Oh, can we get a book copy of the automation, the book for the artificial intelligence and software testing. So if you use that, scan that one, or use this book, don't use your phone. If your phone, you can't save it to a file, use a browser. Then you can just right click and save the file, and that'll let you download the entire book that we did for free, which is always good. The reason why this is here is because I was in Captain America, which was a joke at the start of the talk, that's me in the first movie, which you've never seen Captain America anyway.
Have you got a bag over your head or what?
I've got a hat on.
There's a hat.
Yeah, I was in a POW camp. I had no choice. I was being locked up.
What, like a really winky hat?
I think it might have been.
What kind of hat is that?
I don't know what kind of hat that
There's
is.
just someone behind you. There's two heads there.
All right, let's get back to the real stuff. So hopefully everyone's grabbed that
I was
anyway.
in Midsummer Murders.
Was you?
Yeah, in one episode.
I don't think anyone's heard of that either. So it's like we're literally we're at the absolute end of everything, aren't we?
Come on.
We've only got 45 minutes to go.
No, we've got 15 minutes to
Have we?
go.
Oh, well, there you go. They see you. Okay. So obviously, one of the suggestions earlier around Markdown. Here's another Markdown for I don't know how useful test plans are or test strategies. I kind of said this the other day that I don't think you should ever use any of these tools to create test approaches, test strategy documents.
Well, if no one's going to read it, you may as well generate it with AI.
Is that the new policy?
Well, people cut and paste the last project's strategy, changes a few things, and then no one reads that. And they know they get away with it because no one reads it.
Okay.
Because it's not a document, it's a process.
Okay.
I would argue. It's a whole series of conversations, decisions, negotiations, all sorts of things going on.
Yeah.
The document is just the output from those conversations. If you don't have the conversations, don't bother.
I completely agree. And I know we again showed on the Miro board an example. Here's one that's just been taken out of massive context. It adds sections around approval, tester's name, all those things which are dimensions which I don't think you really need to go down to that level unless really you need to use it. I think it'd be quite hard for it to understand test environments and strategies. I know you've written enough test environment documents in your life, but part of it is you can get down to these. Obviously, these slides are on the deck, so I'm not going to really kill them in too much data. But I do think this is quite interesting. I don't know which tool this is. I've got a feeling that it's definitely a competitor tool. I don't know whose competitor tool it is. But the whole traceability matrix thing against test cases that have been generated, surprise, with the TC thing in the front there. It does feel like to be able to get that ability to understand, because definitely generating test cases, I'm sure if you asked it to generate 6,000 test cases, you probably could get 6,000, but the duplication that would be in there, you'd have to run some test case optimization, deduplication processes, and then somehow map it back to the individual requirement or the particular Jira ID or something, right?
You won't know Hugh, but you need to generate some test case and give it to Hugh and say, what's the coverage?
You can't. Hugh's just buying, selling real estate in New York. So it's
Whatever.
So So yeah, a whole stack around. I do like error analysis. I do think there is a use case around, pinpoint failure and root cause analysis. I think credit to some of our competitors around it. They use Clippy, Chatty, whatever you want to call it. And when they're going into their test results, they kind of say, oh, well, that looks a bit strange. Can you bring up the open telemetry logs for that? And it will bring out the information and interact with the screen. And this is a bit like your idea of integrated development testing environments. It kind of feels like error analysis is something that's quite painful and is quite tedious to get that information. So if you're able to get this information and then fully document it, it's actually quite useful.
Well, looking for patterns could be really helpful. If there are no patterns, never mind. But the cost of doing that isn't great, is it? But it's not a large language model thing. It's a data science. It's a number crunching.
Yeah.
Proper number crunching.
Boundary value analysis.
If it can do it, great.
Yeah, the thing with boundary value.
You've got to give it a model. But then if you don't have the model,
That's the thing. You need the model, but also partly it will just try and give you code solutions. There's a lot of when you're doing this where it actually kind of says, well, actually, I'll just create you some code snippets. As you probably saw when I was opening up my thing, there's a company called DiffBlue, which are an Oxford startup company that creates code unit tests. So it'll read, your existing code coverage if you're using something like SonusQube or something like that, and they'll just generate all the unit tests. Now, if you open them up, they're all really quite good, but at the end of the day, it's just getting to 90% by a magical kind of algorithm that's generating all the tests for you. Have you learned anything from that, or is there any value that you get? I don't know. I'm not going to get into it because we've only got 10 minutes left. So, the final questions, the final frontier, before we all go, I'd say we all go to the pub, but I'm guessing we're not all going to the pub. I'm going to let you take that last question.
okay.
What's QA going to look like in 5 years? Understand that. You've only got 5 minutes, and you can retire.
Like in 5 years. You didn't tell me you were going to do this. I need to think a little bit more than I've got the time for. What can you say? Do we still need testers? Yes. I think our hope is that AI will deliver some really valuable capabilities that we don't have now, and make good testers better. It might make less good testers redundant. Because the whole point of, the whole reason why people are paying attention to AI is that ultimately it's going to save money. No one cares about quality, do they? Really? They only care about money, and quality may have an effect on money. But I think that there will be some interesting and exciting tools coming along in the next 5 years. Not today. We're still figuring out the very, very basics. The models are changing every 6 months, every week almost. And so it's wherever we are now, it's going to be very different in terms of the models that are available for space. I would hope that somebody has the initiative to build what's vaguely called a test model, something that has the knowledge and data to make good judgments about what good tests are. I don't think it's impossible. I just think it's very hard to do, and I'm not going to be the one who does that. It's a big effort. What else can we say? I think testing will still be the core relation to development. Developers, we're stuck with the situation. The developers, managers love developers, testers, they don't love so much. Unless they're in the business. The business, by and large, pay much more attention to what testers do than the internals of a project team, the development team. So we should still pay much more attention to stakeholders, okay, and get knowledgeable enough about the business that we can build meaningful test models that can give good information. And by that I mean generating thousands of test cases and test case results isn't the way to win over business. We need to map all our tests to some business model. It might be a flow chart or a collaboration diagram or swim lanes or some predefined decision table that says this is how we deal with insurance premiums or policies. But it's something that has meaning to the business. If we can tie our test design and our scaling of testing to a model that has meaning to our stakeholders, we're in business. We're literally in business. Okay? So I want to see tools that do a better job of managing expectations from a test modeling kind of point of view, but also taking the test results and putting red, green, and amber against those models that have meaning to business. So people can see it's all green is everywhere, and then it's red over here. One little story. I went to visit a bank again some years. All my stories are years old. I'm sorry. I went to see a bank, and we were talking about risk-based testing and test management. And I was trying to get a job. I was trying to get some work out of it, but it was never going to come. Anyway, we're in this conversation, and there's a guy just walking past the open door in the office, and he's got a big sheet of paper under his arm. I said, "Oh, Bill. Hello, this is Paul. Bill is our operational risk manager for the whole bank. Okay, the whole bank. So he's kind of a senior guy." And he said, "Oh, I'm glad you asked," because he had this piece of paper, and it was like A0 size. So what's that? 16 times? It's about that big. And he laid it out. It's just one big spreadsheet with lots and lots of data on it, and it's all color coded. And mostly it was green, bit of orange, bit of amber, lots of red over here. So, and I said, "What's that?" He said, "That's the IT." There's no shortage of jobs in testing banking systems, even though banking's dead simple. So I shouldn't say that, but I think it is. It's not simple, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of opportunity for testers. And if we can do anything to improve our presence and our, make a case for the value of what we do, I think AI could help us in some ways, particularly in requirements. And if we can get involved in requirements law and show value by finding really big problems in requirements, maybe we'll get some credit. Maybe. I don't know. And I'll shut up.
No, I liked it.
But we might
probably wrong.
I was probably wrong. Yeah, of course. Right. There's another story there, but that's one. When we've got a beer in our hands, I'll tell you another story. I was going to say one last thing, and then you spoke, and I can't remember what it was. Never mind. I'm thinking fewer testers, much more productive testers. That's what we all want. We want to get better at what we do. And there's a lot of people in our business who aren't that good. You don't think? We've met some crap testers. I've met loads of them. You're not, because you're here. The crap testers don't come to conferences.
You just suffered 8 hours of the Paul and Jonathan show, right? So you must be better at the end. Now, I kind of completely agree, right? And I think, the 5 years, we've talked about it today, but, actually, I really like it. The more, everything that you've seen on the boards, the crazy stuff that I put in, when I'm pushing left, I think we kind of lost shift left by saying it's earlier in the development life cycle, but that wasn't really about what we were trying to say. It's not an SDED thing, and I know I saw the rise of SDED as a skill in Google, and then Google not using SDEDs. To me, it's how far left can you really push it to the business, to the person who's holding all those papers saying, well, this is IT, right?
It's talking about the important stuff earlier and getting involved in those conversations.
But it's beyond IT, right? And so, partly IT has caused us to be socketed up. And so I kind of joked, I think it was last night actually, about, if you're Knight, which is Knight here, and I'm also Knight, your phone's ringing, Paul, you need to answer it. So part of it is Knight, as a brand company, if they've got $100 million to spend, which obviously have got a lot more than that, right? Typically, 10% of what they have will go into this magical box, which we'll call IT, right? Just for a second. So that's really, with simple maths, that's 10 million, right? Now, what percentage do you reckon goes into creating new projects? Well, the reality is about 60% goes into IT operations management, keeping the lights on, i.e. ops, that thing that we're supposed to be doing. And the other one goes into the SDLC. And that SDLC is, say, 60 here, 40 here. Now, Jason was saying that actually out of the overall budget of that 40% would be spent on developers, 18% goes to testing. That's how the standard thing is. So 100 million, 10 million, down to 4 million, from 4 million down to a couple of million, let's say, to testing as a discipline. The rest of it here is 9, right? But marketing and brand and productization and manufacturing and everything else which relies on this stuff here gets hit by CrowdStrike, whatever else. By directly talking to them and enabling marketing, product experimentation, all of these cool capabilities, making IT great again, which I can't buy the hat because Trump's got it already. Part of it is by making testing great again. We swapped the conversation around testing. You hate the word quality, so I'm not going to finish on that, otherwise I'll get shot in the head. But part of what, I made a mistake on that last book thing I shared at the end about giving a quote from my dad. My dad's quote said, "Quality is long remembered when cost is long forgotten." So I put it in. He was a professor at university. And then the book came out, I gave him a copy, and he's quite old now, old gentleman. So I never said that. I said, that's Gucci. Gucci said quality is long remembered when price is long forgotten, right? And so I actually think everybody at night cares about what you do, how you help enable them to create new products, AR things which may, NFTs which you could buy with night, with bonds. They want technology to enable their business, but they also want to speak to us because they want to say, I think it's a great idea putting, NFTs and blockchain for, selling traders at 60K a pop. It's a small market. There's a rise score because we're in product engineering. We know it's not a good idea. Part of it is getting into the business, and therefore the prediction, wrongly so for me, is the testing citizens are the business. They're the ones who actually really do care what you say. Paul, can we do this in the business? No, you can't do it in the business because we're still running on mainframe. When I met Tim Cook, he came into the room, he said, who's the guy who keeps on saying we can't do it? And I was like, well, that's me. And it was because every single transaction on the Apple Store is an SAP transaction. How long does it finish to do the ETL to find out what people are buying on the App Store? 7 days. Why does it take 7 days? Because everything's a SAP transaction. Everything is a mainframe transaction. So part of it is he knows if he could work out what's trending and cool and get that at the front of the page in an hour, he made $1 trillion, which is what Apple are doing. But they can't because they're running on mainframe and legacy. They need us as testers, as the people who are going to go, just can't, that's not the work, right? Have you thought about it? Ask these kind of questions, the depot spam stuff, right? So citizen testers, i.e. the business, want to interact with us. And I think probably what we're going to do is we're going to become augmented with these superpowers that we've got based on this session and maybe some of the tools that are going to come out in the future so that we can do more with less. We can interact with people. We can, get our message out. And I think all the years where people said you shouldn't specialize and you should be a jack of all trades, master of none, I think we're going to see specialism come back and you'll be embraced by being an awesome usability tester or an awesome, pen tester or whatever it is. I think specialism is going to be important in this new world. And the most important thing, which I don't want Mark to take the wrong idea with, is going to be context and domain together. It's you knowing insurance industry because you've got 10 years of it, and also testing because you've been the testing industry for 10 years. The more experience you've got, the more valuable you are because people who come in younger might start using the same tools, but they're not going to have the same level of output because you're going to catch things that nobody else can. So I think human intelligence testers as a specialist area will succeed, and it's those which are going to be incredibly valuable.
Can I say one last thing and I'll shut up?
You can indeed.
As every year goes by, we're building less and less testable systems. The systems that we're having to test are getting harder and harder to test. And that problem's not going to go away. It's only going to go in one direction. So, firstly, we've got a job. Secondly, the only way we're going to achieve the level of testing that we need is we've got to use tools in a more sophisticated way and not just treat them as test execution engines. We need them to support our thinking, and we want our superpowers come from what's in our heads, not from how many buttons we can click out. We all know this. So more test execution tools, not the answer. We need tools that help us to think, communicate, collaborate, that kind of thing.
With that said,
And I'm done.
you've managed 8 hours of this. Obviously, we are going to make ourselves available through drinking channels for multiple questions over the next few days. We're going to say a massive thanks to Paul, who filled in literally, was it Friday when I messaged you? Or Saturday?
You gave me a warning a couple of weeks ago, and then I ignored it. So
So he's been in a lot of trouble this week for flying out, and then you're flying out to Brussels, Belgium on Friday for a test retreat with some other old farts.
Yeah.
More testing.
Anyway,
so come and grab us. Massive thanks to everybody. And yeah, hope you got something
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. We will see you at where's the party? I don't know where the party is next, but we will be at the party.
Right.
There'll be a lot of partying apparently. There's a lot of partying yesterday as well. Yeah. If the book came up on the screen, but I said you need to take a photo. Let me put it back up.
I thought the name of the book is what?
Right, here we go. This is this one. On here. So that was that's not that one. This is the book URL. So if you can go to this, what happens is it does double click. No, it doesn't. What it does, it comes to the artificial intelligence software book, which should be.
Got it. I downloaded, but I thought that it's another name.
Yeah, no, that is the one. So this should be where it's artificial intelligence for software testing. Right. This is artificial intelligence software testing. Here that's the book. Right, loads. But there's me.
Yeah, I got it.
So if you use that link which I gave previously, that's the one which that will go to that book.
Okay, thank you.
No problems. I need to get rid of my last Paddington's copy. Let's take it out. Give it to the first person.
What do we do with this?
I don't know what it is. Could be anything. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I think it's just Q. That's the way I look at it anyway.
It's a chef. Chef Paddington. Right. Okay.
Yeah, I just need to stop the stream.